Chapter 114. White Zetsu didn't know the true strength of Uchiha Wuchen, and he didn't want to know. In his opinion, those who tried to test Wuchen's true strength must have been completely wiped out, crushed like insects. Of course, those who Dustless deliberately let go were excluded. "Bring this little brat back," said Wuchen indifferently. He didn't even look at Baizu. Then, he walked away and soon disappeared from everyone's sight. On the other side, in the Rain Village, a different scene was playing out. The Rain Village, as its name suggests, has 4 seasons throughout the year. This village has always been closed off from the outside world, giving people an extremely mysterious feeling. However, due to the existence of Hanzo the Salamander, who has the title of demigod, although the outside world is very curious about the existence of this village, not many people dare to enter without permission. Even if a demigod isn't a god, it's still a super powerful existence, on the same level as the leaders of the 5 great villages. It's really interesting. I love to see people killing each other. Wu Chen was wearing a cloak. His dark eyes were full of interest as he watched the 2 parties fighting. A wicked smile appeared on his face, which made people shudder with fear. The 2 sides were wearing different costumes, but their appearance was similar, and they were staring at each other fiercely. Obviously, they belonged to 2 opposing groups, and the group wearing the Rain Ninja's costume obviously had the upper hand. The centaur who had the upper hand looked down at the crowd below with disdain and complacency on their faces. "Yahiko, Nagato, get out of here, this guy is obviously coming for you too." An anxious and worried voice came from the mouth of the purple-haired girl, who was tightly bound by 2 burly Rain Ninjas, and couldn't move. The people fighting below were the Rain Ninjas of the Akatsuki and Hanzo the Salamander. The girl with light blue-purple hair who was shouting at Yahiko and Nagato to leave was undoubtedly Konan. The situation in front of them was as clear as a mirror. The Akatsuki's Konan was captured by Hanzo, so she was naturally at a disadvantage, and the Rain Ninjas were all proud of themselves. Still as stupid as before. Staring at Konan's anxious face, Dustless disdainfully curled his lips. Yahiko was an optimistic person who valued his teammates very much, and he would never leave. "There's no cure for this idiot." Looking at Yahiko, Wu Chen's eyes flashed with deep disdain. It was precisely because this kid listened to Hanzo's slanderous words that Xiao Xiao fell into his trap and Konan was caught. It was entirely his own fault, he can't blame anyone else. "Release Konan, I'll spare your life, Hanzo the Salamander." Uzumaki Nagato's eyes swept with endless cold light, and stared at the man with an iron mask on the cliff in front of him. And his cold voice spread, accompanied with endless killing intent, which made people's scalp numb. This kid's control of the Rinnegan seems to have become better than before. Dustless slightly pressed down the cloak on his head, and his pupils flashed with a touch of surprise, and he was quite surprised. Obviously, after the short fight with Dustless last time, Nagato knew the gap between his strength and Dustless's, so he deliberately went back to train and familiarize himself with the various abilities of the Rinnegan. "Idiot, if it weren't for your eyes, you wouldn't be able to use some jutsu." Dustless sighed for Nagato, and shook his head. Even if Nagato worked hard for 100 years, he still wouldn't be able to use Madara's soul, border prison jutsu. Just like how Dustless transplanted Madara's Rinnegan, he didn't have the confidence to use the soul, border prison jutsu. Only by thoroughly defeating Madara through the system can he take everything from him. Let her go. On the cliff, Hanzo the Salamander was wearing a mask, but everyone could see the contempt on his face, and he sneered. "You can't let this girl go, unless you kill her," Hanzo the Salamander said to the red-haired Nagato, and at the same time pointed to the orange-haired Yahiko. "You want to fight me? I'm still too inexperienced." Hanzo the Salamander's eyes swept over Nagato and Yahiko, and he was extremely proud of himself. In fact, before this plan to deceive the Akatsuki, he spent a lot of time and effort to investigate the 3 leaders of the Akatsuki, Yahiko, Nagato, and Konan. After knowing that Yahiko was a person who valued friendship and righteousness, he came up with this plan. If Yahiko was a person with a heart of stone, such a plan wouldn't work on him. "How do you choose, the leader of the Akatsuki, Yahiko?" Hanzo the Salamander stared at the expressionless Yahiko with a gloomy and terrible look. His friend's choice was the same as his own life, and for him, It was the most interesting topic in life. Nagato, kill me. Yahiko turned around and said indifferently to Nagato. His eyes were full of despair at the prospect of death. Yahiko, are you crazy? Nagato looked at Yahiko in disbelief. Hanzo the salamander was obviously plotting against them. Even if he killed Yahiko, he was sure that he wouldn't let Konan and the Akatsuki go. However, Yahiko just smiled indifferently. Looking at the kunai in Nagato's hand, he didn't hesitate to rush forward. Poochie! Bright red blood dripped to the ground, and a sad atmosphere spread. Looking up, Yahiko's abdomen was pierced with a sharp kunai. Nagato looked at Yahiko, who was willing to die under his hands, and his eyes were full of despair. Due to excessive sadness, he lost his ability to think. This problematic child is finally King dead. Dustless in the distance breathed a sigh of relief. If Yahiko's death hadn't made Nagato despair, Dustless wouldn't have been able to convince him to join them. As for Obito, he was already defeated by Dustless's Tsukuyomi. Chapter 115. After all, Yahiko was very similar to Uzumaki Naruto in all aspects, and their personalities were even more similar. Let go of Konan. Seeing his most precious friend die in front of him, Uzumaki Nagato's murderous aura poured out like a storm, making the situation even more terrifying. Let her go. After staring at Yahiko's body for a while, Hanzo the salamander breathed a sigh of relief. He waved his hand, and the two ninjas who were holding Konan looked at each other and immediately released her. But at the same time, their eyes flashed with a cunning and cruel smile. After Yahiko's death, Uzumaki Nagato's eyes were fixed on Konan, and her safety was more important than his own. Although the emotional changes of the two ninjas were very weak, Uzumaki Nagato could see it clearly with his Rinnegan. Get away from Konan! Uzumaki Nagato's roar was like a thunderbolt in Konan's ears. She subconsciously turned her head and saw the two ninjas rushing towards her. She was about to die. What a troublesome little girl. In the distance, Dustless, who was wearing a cloak, slightly lowered the brim of his hat, and his eyes flashed with helplessness. He looked at Konan's panicked face and slowly shook his head. He lifted his 5 fingers and pointed at Konan, and a majestic and irresistible suction force erupted from his hand. Konan's pupils turned white, and her pretty face was filled with a strange sadness. She closed her eyes and waited for her death. Perhaps with Yahiko's death, her heart was filled with despair. She stopped resisting and wanted to accompany Yahiko to the afterlife. The dead are gone, and you are still young. You should look at your future with a long-term vision. The calm, tranquil, and slightly aged voice rang out. Xiaonan suddenly felt that her body was incomparably light and agile. She subconsciously opened her lively and beautiful eyes. She didn't know when, but Konan was floating in the air. This is... Staring blankly at the crowd below, Xiaonan's eyes were filled with astonishment. Soon after, she felt a majestic and irresistible force of absolute gravity behind her. It was like the hand of God, making her unable to move. She suddenly turned her head, her cold eyes fixed on the distant mountain peak, on the thin figure who was isolated from the rest of the world. The young man was wearing a trench coat embroidered with red clouds. He had a mysterious temperament. He wore a bamboo hat with a wind chime on his head and a spiral-shaped mask on his face. It was impossible to see his face. He opened his hand and casually pointed it at Xiaonan. However, Xiaonan felt as if she was in a god's domain. Her body's various functions were absolutely restricted. She couldn't move, let alone break free. Spirit summoning. Heretic demon statue. Seeing Konan safe and sound, and being rescued by a mysterious person wearing a spiral mask, Nagato was relieved, and the heavy burden in his heart disappeared. Yahiko entrusted him with Konan's protection, and even if he died, he couldn't let her be in danger. Ka. The space behind Nagato suddenly cracked, and a giant in the form of a dead tree came out of the void. Its mouth was full of sharp teeth like the teeth of a shark. Ao. A depressing roar came out of the giant's mouth. It seemed that the vortex Nagato's power wasn't strong enough, and the summoned giant faintly shrank back. Ha! The Rinnegan surged with ripples, and black lines spread out. Staring at Hanzo, Nagato suddenly clapped his hands and immediately shouted, "Pucci!" There was no doubt that the monster was the Gedo Mazo. It opened its mouth again, and countless black iron rods shot out from its mouth, like blades inserted into Uzumaki Nagato's body, absorbing his chakra and vitality. Nagato's chakra wasn't enough, so he could only replace it with his own vitality. After a while, Uzumaki Nagato's body shriveled up, leaving only skin and bones. His face was pale and weak. Nagato. Looking at the shriveled body, Konan's watery eyes were full of worry and pain, and at the same time, her body fell to Dustless's side. Look carefully. The scene in front of you is the essence of this cruel world. The body fragrance of the orchid in the empty valley inevitably entered his ears and nose. Behind the mask, Wu Chen's face was a little unnatural, but it was quickly restrained. He whispered to Xiao Nan. "Oh, Ao Ao Ao." The Gedo demon statue roared again. A thick transparent dragon came out of the Gedo demon statue's mouth. It was like a wild beast out of its cage, and it roared to the sky. "That's..." Konan looked at the endless transparent dragon in horror. Looking at the dragon coming out of the Gedo Mazo's mouth, her soul trembled. There's nothing to be surprised about. His chakra and strength are limited, and he can't exert the power of the Gedo Mazo to the limit. Looking at the transparent dragon roaring in the sky, Dustless's eyes flashed with sarcasm. This monster can scare others, but for him, it's just a piece of cake. The Gedo Mazo is the outer shell of the Jubi, and Nagato can only exert 30% of its power. Staring at the surprised Hanzo and the others on the cliff, Dustless's eyes turned quickly, and his body erupted with a strong aura, and a very oppressive aura floated from Dustless's body. After fusing with Hashirama's chakra, Dustless could control the Gedo Mazo even without the legendary Rinnegan. "Let me control the Gedo Mazo. I'll let you guys see the power of the legendary Gedo Mazo even without chakra. It can still destroy the world." Chapter 116. The Gedo Mazo used to be the shell of the Jubi. As the body of the Jubi, its power was beyond doubt. Even without chakra, its power should not be underestimated. Uzumaki Nagato was not Madara, and he did not open the Rinnegan. Let alone Madara, even Dustless's control of the Gedo Mazo was not comparable to Uzumaki Nagato. A powerful eye power overflowed from Dustless's eyes, and the chakra spear that was spat out from the Gedo statue's mouth disappeared. It was sucked back into the Gedo statue's mouth. What's going on? Uzumaki Nagato stared blankly at the Gedo Mazo Nagato, who had returned to its mouth. His pale face suddenly turned black, and he looked at the numerous black iron rods behind him indignantly. His heart was particularly tangled and depressed. Didn't this mean that all his previous efforts were in vain? Although I don't understand what happened, but it seems that kid's technique failed. In short, that kid's Rinnegan belongs to me this time. Looking at Nagato's shocked face, Hanzo the salamander smiled gloomily. The legendary Rinnegan is a god's eye that is above the Sharingan and Byakugan. It was about to be used by him. Ignorant fool, do you think anyone can use Rinnegan? Dustless, who was wearing the spiral mask, saw the passion in Hanzo's eyes. He sneered again and again, with endless contempt in his voice. Nagato was a descendant of the Six Paths, and the burden of using the Rinnegan was so great, let alone Hanzo, who had nothing to do with the Sage of the Six Paths. "Come out, Gedo Golem." Dustless stared at the Gedo demon statue that was hidden in the void with only half of its head exposed. His gaze froze, and he raised his strength to the maximum. "Ao Ao Ao. Ka ka ka." The Gedo Golem's angry voice resounded through the clouds, and a powerful shockwave came out of its mouth. The terrifying shockwave caused everyone to retreat. Under everyone's horrified gazes, the Gedo Golem's huge hands tore apart the space on both sides. The terrifying power caused the space crack to expand continuously. This feeling. Impossible. Could it be that the Gedo Golem has already escaped my control? Uzumaki Nagato felt that he had lost contact with the Gedo Mazo, and he looked at it in disbelief. Just now, it seemed that some kind of superpower directly cut off his connection with the Gedo Mazo. His face was pale, and his Rinnegan flashed with different emotions. Nagato didn't expect that the Gedo Mazo, which could only be controlled by the Rinnegan, could be taken away. And looking at the current state of the ghetto mazo, it was obvious that the caster behind it was much stronger than him. In particular, the deafening roar from the ghetto mazo's mouth made Nagato's soul tremble in fear. Ha! As he formed a mudra with both of his hands, a stronger chakra wave was emitted from Dustless's body. The ominous and decaying aura of the demonic statue of Ghetto became even thicker. What kind of monster is this? Seeing the situation rapidly deteriorating, Hanzo the salamander, who had been quietly watching and planning to seize the opportunity to seize the Rinnegan, his old face turned purple. How was this a failure of the spell casting? It was clearly the ghetto golem receiving an even stronger summon. Could it be him? Suddenly remembering the mysterious black-clothed man who rescued Xiao Nan, Hanzo subconsciously looked over. Although Dustless's mask and hat covered his face, Hanzo could still see the contempt in Dustless's eyes. Uzumaki Nagato also looked at Dustless. The difference was that Dustless gave him a familiar feeling. Ao ao. Ka ka ka. Pung pung pung. The ghetto golem roared angrily at the sky once again. Its powerful withered tree arm unleashed its full power, completely tearing apart the space that enveloped its body. Its huge body fell from the sky, causing the entire ground to tremble. A few meters of sand and dust were stirred up, and it immediately exploded. So big. The ghetto golem's dozens of meters tall withered tree body suddenly reflected in the eyes of the world. Everyone unconsciously held their breath, looking at the towering giant in horror. The uneven layers of thick muscles all over its body were particularly terrifying. The ancient aura of decay overflowing from its body was particularly oppressive. The 9 incomparably ferocious eyes were like a demon from hell, and the 10 column-shaped bulges on its back made people involuntarily afraid of this prehistoric creature in front of them. This height is estimated to be comparable to Uchiha Madara's ultimate body. Dustless also saw the ghetto golem for the first time in broad daylight. At the same time, he compared Madara's ultimate body to the ghetto golem in his heart. Are you the one who controls the ghetto golem? Dustless's voice was naturally heard by Konan, and her pretty face changed dramatically. You actually know that it's the ghetto golem. It seems that Uzumaki Nagato told you a lot about the Rinnegan. Dustless turned his head and glanced at Konan in surprise. Then he calmed down and said with a calm tone, Uzumaki Nagato has the Rinnegan, and he does have the ability to control the ghetto golem, but he's not the only one. Dustless still remembered that Uchiha Itachi used to control the ghetto golem without the Rinnegan. This means that as long as a large number of Hashirama's cells were integrated into the body, he could control the ghetto golem even without the Rinnegan. Moreover, his control was more proficient than Uzumaki Nagato with the Rinnegan. Who the hell are you? Seeing that Dustless was omniscient, Konan frowned and asked curiously. Dustless wasn't hostile to her. Konan naturally knew that Dustless wasn't hostile to her, so she didn't guard against him. Who am I? At least for now, I'm your friend, an ally who can drag you from hell to heaven. After saying that, without waiting for Konan to speak, the ghetto golem's huge body suddenly fell to the ground with its hands on the ground. 10 pillar-shaped protrusions on its back swept a dazzling silver lightning. Pa, pa, pa. Intense destructive lightning flashed on the back of the demonic statue of Ghetto. Crackling sounds could be heard as a blinding light flashed across the void. It was as if a divine sword had slashed the sky apart. The violent lightning was like a punishment from the heavens. Everything in the world seemed to be on the verge of collapse. Chapter 117. The razor-sharp lightning that could pierce through everything surged out like a tide, covering an area that was unprecedentedly vast and boundless. Almost all the creatures felt a sense of oppression, and a sense of despair involuntarily rose up in their hearts. There was no need to deliberately target, just a simple sweep. What a terrifying range and attack power! His eyes slightly narrowed, standing on the top of the mountain. Hanzo stared at the silver light on the back of the ghetto mazo and took a deep breath. His pupils were filled with uncertainty, and a sense of fear appeared in his heart. And that kid's ability is so strange. His strength is so terrifying, like a pool of stagnant water. I can't see through him. Suddenly looking up, Looking at the masked man Dustless who was standing side by side with Conan, Hanzo's heart inevitably sank. The enemy wasn't terrifying, but an enemy like Wuxia was undoubtedly the most terrifying. His entire body was covered in a mysterious veil. Moreover, his strength was extremely extraordinary. It was as if he had appeared out of thin air. There was no trace that could be found. What a terrifying strength! He can even control a summoned beast that can only be controlled by the Rinnegan, and it seems that he is more proficient than Uzumaki Nagato. Speaking of this, Hanzo the salamander suspected that his brain wasn't big enough. Rinnegan's summoned beast was forcibly snatched away by others, not to mention that Wuxia was even more proficient in using the Geto Mazo. It was really beyond his scope of understanding. Sighing, Hanzo the salamander knew that if he didn't admit defeat this time, he might lose his life here. Although he had the strength of a demigod, Dustless's ability was already in the realm of gods. All troops retreat. Without thinking, Hanzo directly ordered all the ninjas of the Rain Village to retreat. For a cunning person like him, a temporary defeat was nothing. It was just a trivial matter. Anyway, the leader of the Akatsuki, Yahiko, was completely dead. Maybe in the near future, the Akatsuki would fall apart. The Rain Ninjas looked at Hanzo who was the first to leave, and immediately looked at each other, and left one after another. Damned bastard, I will definitely kill you in the future. Turning his head to stare at the masked man Dustless, Hanzo the salamander's hatred for Dustless had reached its peak. He couldn't wait to eat his flesh and drink his blood. In short, even if he dismembered Dustless into 1,000 pieces, it still wouldn't be able to reduce the volcanic eruption of anger in his heart. Without Dustless's interference, maybe the Rinnegan would have already been captured, and the Rain Village under his leadership would have also risen strongly, and become a village on the same level as the 5 great ninja villages, or even above them. You still want to run? You actually still want to run in front of me? Looking at the Rain Ninja who wanted to escape, Dustless sneered as he understood Hanzo's despicable approach. Except for him, all of you go to hell. With a contemptuous smile on his face, Dustless's pupils suddenly enlarged, and a strong energy fluctuation came out. The lightning behind the Geto Mazo was obviously shining to the extreme. Like a spider web, the lightning erupted out, and the endless void suddenly trembled. Whoosh! The speed of the lightning was naturally extremely fast. Its speed was so fast that it disappeared the moment it appeared. It was far beyond the limit of human vision. And the moment it appeared again, it covered the Rain Ninja who was fleeing in panic. Boom boom boom. Even without a scream, the Rain Ninja was directly eroded by the huge silver lightning, and in the blink of an eye, his whole body was swallowed. The ninja who was hit was lying on the ground, motionless. There was no breath of life, and he had stopped breathing. Obviously he was dead. Only Hanzo the salamander was spared. Why didn't you kill him? You should have the ability to kill him. Seeing Hanzo completely disappear, Conan's pretty face turned black, and she stared at Dustless, and the good impression she had for Dustless disappeared. Hanzo the salamander was also in the range of the Geto Mazo's lightning, but he was able to escape unscathed. Obviously Dustless did this deliberately. Hanzo the salamander must be killed by him. Pointing to Uzumaki Nagato, Dustless said indifferently, even if I kill Hanzo the salamander, he will live in the shadow of Yahiko's death for the rest of his life, and it must be done by him. Although Uzumaki Nagato would live in the shadow of Yahiko's death, Hanzo the salamander must be killed by him. Otherwise, Dustless was sure that Uzumaki Nagato would never be able to let go of Yahiko's death. Is that so? Conan's eyes flashed, and her eyes were faintly filled with tears, and she looked like she was about to cry. Her whole body was filled with sadness, and her delicate body was as weak as a willow branch, and she fell towards Dustless. Thinking of the twists and turns in the life of Yahiko and the others, the world couldn't help but sigh at the impermanence of the world. And who was the one who caused all of this? This is the essence of this world. The weak are prey to the strong. The so-called bridge to communicate and understand people's hearts is illusory, and it only exists in the world of dreams. Instead of letting the world live in pain, it's better for us to work together and create a country of dreams. Dustless caught Conan who was falling with the wind, and feeling the warmth from her delicate hands, His mind couldn't help but shake, and he took a deep breath. After stabilizing the strange emotions in his heart, Dustless regained his calm. "Who the hell are you?" Quickly breaking free from Dustless's hand, Conan's face was very unnatural, especially when she felt Dustless's body heat, which made her even more uncomfortable. In order to hide her embarrassment, she looked at Dustless and said coldly, "Akatsuki doesn't need to cooperate with people like you." "Is that so? That's a pity. But what you say doesn't seem to count." With a sigh of pity, Dustless walked towards Uzumaki Nagato. When a person suffers a huge blow, their spirit and emotions will be abnormally weak, and as long as there is a little temptation, Dustless is sure that Uzumaki Nagato will take the bait. Chapter 118. Staring at Nagato's pupils, Dustless breathed a sigh of relief. He was afraid that Nagato would use one of the most powerful forbidden jutsu of the Rinnegan, the Outer Path, reincarnation of the heavens, to resurrect Yahiko. But obviously he was overthinking, as Nagato probably hadn't mastered this jutsu yet. Otherwise, with Nagato's nature, he would definitely resurrect Yahiko. "Nagato, you!" Conan looked at the numerous black iron rods behind Nagato, and her beautiful eyes flashed with self-blame. If she wasn't caught by Hanzo, Nagato wouldn't be like this, and Yahiko wouldn't have died because of her. "Conan, I'm fine." Uzumaki Nagato shook his head and gave Conan a look of concern, indicating that there was no need to worry. Then his eyes fell on Dustless. His eyes rippled, and he immediately lowered his head as if he was thinking about something. Nagato wasn't stupid, and he knew that he and Dustless weren't in the same dimension. Especially when he saved Conan, he knew that Dustless wasn't hostile to them. People will always die. Feeling the deep sadness oozing from Conan and Uzumaki Nagato, he seemed to be affected as well, and Dustless couldn't speak directly. Everything rises and falls because of fate. Even if Yahiko died, he didn't want to see you like this, just like this rain, just like his crying. Suddenly, the rain poured down, as if venting its dissatisfaction, mercilessly raging on the earth. Dustless's body emitted a faint halo, covering the three of them, and quietly looking at the world in the rain, the atmosphere was particularly oppressive. "I won't inherit Yahiko's will." Yahiko, he was wrong. After a moment of silence, Nagato's face suddenly became ferocious, and his eyes emitted a cold light, giving the feeling that he had fallen into the devil's path, and his whole body was cold and isolated from the world. No matter who, in the face of the death of their loved one, would have a great change of heart. Just like Nagato now, it was because of Yahiko's death that he saw the world more clearly, and looked at it with an unprecedented vision. "Why do you say that?" Hearing this, Dustless asked with a deadpan expression, and the corner of his mouth raised into a smile, but it couldn't be seen because of the mask. "The bridge to everyone's heart doesn't exist." With a cold sneer on his face, Nagato's murderous intent spread out like a tide, and the rain that was close to Dustless and the others took a detour. "People who don't understand the pain of war, and war can't understand the preciousness of peace like us. For those who have never experienced pain, war only exists in their imagination's imagination. Only pain can make them understand the preciousness of peace, and piously pray for peace to come. In other words, only those who know of pain know of peace," Nagato said in a heavy tone, with an unprecedented determination. Yahiko's death could be said to have changed his temperament, giving him a new goal in life. Nonsense. Looking at Nagato, who seemed to have come back from the dead, Dustless sneered. The so-called peace didn't matter to Dustless, but Nagato didn't have the right to give pain to the world, nor did he have the qualification to do so. However, Uzumaki Nagato's current situation was exactly as Madara had planned. "So, what's your next goal? Using Rinnegan to destroy the world, or?" Looking at Akatsuki's uniform, Dustless said meaningfully. Hearing Dustless's words, Nagato's Rinnegan surged with a cold luster. "I must establish a huge organization, one that covers the whole world." Nagato's eyes were full of light, and his tone was resolute and irrefutable. A huge plan quickly took shape in his heart, and he already had a basic outline. Yahiko's establishment of the Akatsuki was his greatest legacy. Of course, All the ordinary ninjas were completely eliminated. After this battle, Uzumaki Nagato understood that in the face of absolute power, numbers didn't matter at all, just like Dustless did before. Seeing Nagato's face full of determination, Dustless was relieved. He was really afraid that his words weren't as good as Obito's, and he couldn't fool Nagato. It seems that he was thinking too much. Time flew by like a white steed, unknowingly passing by extremely quickly. During this period, a lot of major events happened. The most sensational event was the end of the Battle of Kanushi Bridge, which ended with the victory of Konoha's ninja, led by Minato. The Rock Village surrendered, which also marked Konoha's victory. Minato was also promoted to the position of the 4th Hokage, which was a joyous occasion for him. The one who couldn't accept it the most was Obito. He even knew that after Minato became the Hokage, his other body that was slowly repairing and fusing with his body cracked again due to his violent rage. Obito believed that everything that Minato had today was because of Rin's death. The reconstruction of the Akatsuki was also progressing in an orderly manner. All the former S-class ninjas were plundered by Dustless, but they weren't complete yet. Those who disobeyed Nagato's orders were all subdued by Tendo Pain's power. Akatsuki, this is the real establishment. In the warm pool, Dustless leaned on the side, leisurely closed his eyes, and enjoyed the service of the beautiful woman behind him. Her silver hair was spotless and flowed down like a waterfall. Her impressive figure was curvaceous and half of her breasts were covered. Perhaps it was because she was twisting too much. There were even some pink cherry blossoms that could be seen. She was the one who scrubbed Dustless's back. I said, be gentle, this is human skin, not iron skin. Feeling the stinging pain on his back, Dustless was speechless and shouted angrily. He just wanted to relax in the bath, but he didn't expect Otsutsuki to suddenly attack him. Dustless didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Chapter 119. Otsutsuki Haguro looked at Wuchin's smooth back with dissatisfaction. His expression was fierce. This kid came to Earth only to carry out Madara's so-called Eye of the Moon plan, but he didn't care about her at all. How could she not be angry? Her jade-like hand touched the tender flesh of Dustless's waist, and immediately made a 360-degree turn without mercy. Ouch. It hurts, are you crazy? The piercing pain spread all over his nerves. Dustless turned his head angrily and glared at Otsutsuki Haguro. Looking at her white and delicate face, he knew that this tigress was not looking for him with good intentions. Otsutsuki Haguro looked coldly at the angry Dustless and said without showing any weakness, "Have you forgotten what you promised me on the moon? Now your actions are just putting your so-called plan into effect." At the end of her words, Otsutsuki Haguro looked at Dustless with fire in her eyes, and her pretty face condensed into ice. This guy not only has no intention of marrying her, but also plays all day long. Especially recently, he has been very close to Konan in the Akatsuki. Dustless's anger disappeared in an instant, and his face began to become unnatural. Otsutsuki Haguro sincerely helped Dustless, but this woman's unrealistic idea really made Dustless quite entangled. Dustless naturally understood Otsutsuki Haguro's idea. She wanted to use him to create a new Otsutsuki family. How can I let you succeed? Wu Chen's brain cells spun intensely. His eyes suddenly lit up, and he came up with a plan. He smiled and said, "I'm still young now. You should let me grow up for a few more years. How can my skinny arms and legs withstand your oppression?" The age gap was too big. Although a few years have passed, Dustless was still young, and Otsutsuki Haguro was already more than 20 years old. Of course, this was also an excuse for Dustless. Although he was still young, his physique was unusually strong due to regular exercise, and his physical ability in all aspects of his body was naturally not bad. The reason why he said so was too perfunctory. Splash! Otsutsuki Haguro jumped into the pool and walked gracefully in front of Dustless. Her phoenix-like eyes looked at Dustless, and she frowned and asked, "Not small, I have seen it. Obviously not small." After that, Otsutsuki Haguro looked at Dustless's body with a puzzled face. King. Seeing this, Dustless's mouth twitched fiercely, and black lines hung on his forehead. His lungs churned, and blood almost burst out of his mouth. I didn't mean that. Our age gap is too big, you have to let me grow up for a few more years. Otsutsuki Haguro's eyes. Haguro's eyes. Otsutsuki Haguro's eyes is Haguro's eyes. Haguro's eyes. Dustless's was really afraid he was really out of her. Out. Was Haguro's. Dustless Haguro, that's right. Hearing this, Otsutsuki Haguro suddenly froze. Only then did she realize that although Dustless was taller than her, the age gap between the two was still quite big. But that's not important. Haguro blinked, biting her jade finger, and said very seriously, "Those daimyo's children start when they are 11 or 12 years old." Stop. Dustless's mouth twitched again. He looked at Haguro and said sarcastically, "You even investigated this kind of thing. Is there a need to investigate this? This is a well-known thing." Haguro rolled her eyes and looked at Dustless contemptuously. The children of ordinary families began to take on the responsibility of carrying on the family line at the age of 15 or 16 years old. Even the only son of some big families had prepared a wife in advance to strengthen the family line. You perfunctory all day long, do you take my affairs to heart? Seeing Dustless just bowing his head in silence, Haguro's face changed slightly, and her tone was no longer as harsh as before. Opening his mouth, Dustless, who wanted to refuse Otsutsuki Yuro, took back his words. He looked up and saw some tears in Otsutsuki Yuro's eyes. "After a month, I promise to give you a satisfactory answer." Dustless pulled Otsutsuki into his arms and gently patted his shoulder. His action was unprecedentedly bold. His lips pressed against Otsutsuki's, and his little hands began to move restlessly. The deep blue starry sky stretched as far as the eye could see. It was beautiful beyond compare. Countless specks of light adorned the starry sky, making it seem like a mythical world. The fresh and refined air made one feel refreshed. It was the world inside the system. Dustless looked at Ling, who was standing in the distance like a goddess above the 9 heavens. His lips twitched slightly, and ripples appeared in his eyes. "Who are you going to train with this time?" Ling-er's emotionless tone drifted out of her mouth. She always maintained an unchanging indifference. She never had any emotional fluctuations. Combined with the girl's natural beauty, this was the only flaw. "Of course it's Brother Uchiha," Wuchin said carelessly. His tone was full of confidence. The characters that were trained by the system were at their peak, which meant that Heir Juzi would be at his most powerful period. Uchiha. Hearing this, Ling-er was stunned. Apparently, she didn't know who Uchiha was. She looked at Dustless in confusion. "Of course it's Uchiha Sasuke's long-out yin," Dustless said with dissatisfaction. To be honest, he didn't like Uchiha Sasuke at all. He was even a little disgusted. However, as the saying goes, persimmons are easy to pinch. Although Dustless wanted to train with Uchiha Madara, this training was different. It was a training with his life on the line. If he lost, he couldn't start again. Moreover, the system's characters were at their strongest when they were alive, which meant that Dustless might face the Jubi's Jinchuriki, Uchiha Madara. Although Dustless was conceited, he wasn't sure if he could face Uchiha Madara alone. After all, he was gambling with his life. Failure meant complete death. Naturally, he could only start with Uchiha Madara. Chapter 120. After all, the gap between Uchiha Sasuke and Uchiha Madara is obvious to all, and this kid has something that Dustless values the most: Indra's reincarnation identity. Although Uchiha Madara also has it, in comparison, Dustless chose the weaker Sasuke. In that case, as you wish, but this time is different from the past. Once you lose, you will be completely obliterated. I don't need to say this. Ling-er's heavenly voice rang out once again. It was still like an ancient well without any ripples, without any human emotions. It was as if it had been programmed in advance, filled with killing intent. Once I step out, I will never regret it. Even if the corpse in front of me falls into the sea of blood, my heart will not change. Come at me. The corner of his mouth slightly raised, Dustless's handsome face showed a wild and unruly smile, and the vast chakra broke out like a vast ocean. The golden chakra rendered the entire sky, and all the endless sky was dyed golden. Under Dustless's indifferent annotation, Linger's whole body suddenly changed, and he became a handsome young man who looked like Dustless. The young man had sharp edges and corners. His face was handsome and clean as if it was carved by a knife. His white skin was like ice and snow. His messy hair danced with the wind. He was even more unruly. The piercingly cold killing intent and decisiveness between his brows were quite similar to Wu Chen's. His temperament was cold and unapproachable. It was Uchiha Sasuke. 6 Tomo Rinnegan and Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. If I'm not careful, I may really fall. Staring at the Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan of Sasuke's single eye, and the obvious 6 Tomo Rinnegan, Dustless felt the extremely powerful dark eye power in it, and he thought very seriously. Although Dustless didn't like Uchiha Sasuke, he had to admit that Uchiha Sasuke's strength was almost invincible after defeating Otsutsuki Kagaya. How troublesome. Looking at the indifferent Uchiha Sasuke, Dustless smiled faintly, and his left and right eyes turned sharply at the same time. His left eye turned into a scarlet Mangekyo, and his right eye turned into a blue Tensigen. A great battle was about to break out. With the eruption of Dustless's chakra, Linger, who transformed into Uchiha Sasuke, wasn't afraid at all. A similarly terrifying and majestic chakra burst out. It wasn't inferior to Dustless's, and because of the gift from Hagoromo Otsutsuki, the amount of chakra was more than Dustless's. Ka. The competition of the two men's momentum blew the flowing air away, forming a large vacuum area. Especially in the area with Wuchen and Uchiha Sasuke as the center, almost everything was completely crushed and annihilated. Pui. The sound of cloth tearing sounded, and the sharp-eyed people could see that there were some slight cracks in the corner of Wuchen's clothes. Of course, Uchiha Sasuke was the same, and some of his clothes burst open and fell to the ground. This guy is quite capable. Looking at the snow-like white clothes falling on the ground, Dustless was slightly stunned, and his eyes were full of surprise. When he was about to look up, a black shadow suddenly covered him. Looking up, it was Uchiha Sasuke with a cold face and a shiny katana. Whoosh! A cold light flashed through the void, and the sharp katana rushed down, trying to split Dustless's body into two. So fast. No, that shouldn't be speed, it should be some kind of jutsu. At the critical moment, Dustless quickly elementalized to get rid of the fatal blow, and immediately pulled a distance away from Uchiha Sasuke. Looking at the fragments on the ground, his brows slightly wrinkled, and he quickly understood. This is the ability of his 6 Tomo Rinnegan. It seems to be called Heavenly Hand Power. It seems to be a space ninjutsu. Recalling the ability of Uchiha Sasuke's Rinnegan in his previous life, Dustless's heart quickly relaxed. This jutsu allows the caster and the target to exchange positions in a specific range in an instant, which can avoid the enemy's attack, and can also form an attack on the enemy by exchanging himself and other objects. Just now, Uchiha Sasuke and the fragments of his clothes were obviously exchanged. I really can't be careless. His heart sank slightly. Dustless's eyes were a little hazy and heavy. Uchiha Sasuke in the later stage is definitely one of the most powerful characters. Amaterasu. Staring at Dustless, Uchiha Sasuke suddenly burst out. Bright red blood stains flowed out of his pupils, and immediately saw black flames burning Dustless's body, roasting Dustless's body. You want to burn me with a mere ghost fire? Naive. Looking at the black flames burning on his body, Dustless suddenly sneered. The Tensigen in his right eye twisted sharply, and his body instantly became like a black hole in the depths of the universe, swallowing Amaterasu in an instant. As for Dustless, naturally he was intact. But it's really powerful. 6 Tomo Rinnegan. Looking at Linger transformed into Uchiha Sasuke, Dustless wasn't stingy with his praise. As for the Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, Dustless directly ignored it. For now, it's the same with or without the Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. Although it can help him increase a lot of strength, it doesn't have much effect. All in all, for Dustless who now has the Tensigen and Mangekyo Sharingan, it's like a chicken bone, tasteless to eat, but a pity to throw it away. Even now Dustless only has the Mangekyo Sharingan. after fusing with Hashirama's cells, it's not much different from the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan. You're not bad. Uchiha Sasuke saw that Dustless could easily resolve his 2 attacks, and was also surprised by Dustless's strength, but soon his face changed, and he stared at Dustless and said coldly, "You are indeed strong, but compared to me, you are still too far away." Hearing this, Dustless's mouth twitched fiercely, and the corners of his mouth lifted into a wry smile, thinking that this guy is really famous for pretending to be weak. Chapter 121. Uchiha Sasuke can be said to be blessed by the heavens. He should be glad that he has such a meticulous brother like Uchiha Itachi. Everything that Uchiha Sasuke has was obtained by stepping on Uchiha Itachi's corpse. Without Uchiha Itachi, he might have become blind. Naturally, Uchiha Sasuke also inherited everything from Itachi, whether in genjutsu or other aspects. It's my turn to fight back. Dustless's eyes suddenly condensed cold light, and his pupils enlarged. Ordinary ninjutsu is useless against Rinnegan. Ordinary S-class ninjutsu like Amaterasu is almost useless in front of Rinnegan, and it can be easily absorbed by Rinnegan. If you want to use it, you have to use the unexpected. Tensigen Chakra Mode. Dustless's body suddenly swept up the green chakra coat, and Dustless's body was wrapped tightly, and many green prayer beads floated behind him. The feeling he gave off was like the difference between heaven and earth. This is... Linger transformed into Uchiha Sasuke and looked at Dustless, who was wrapped in green chakra. Naturally, he has never seen the legendary Tensigen, especially the green eyes floating behind Dustless, which made him feel quite familiar. Those strange beads floating around seem similar to the truth-seeking ball. Although Uchiha Sasuke is arrogant and unruly, he is also a careful and calm person. Under the 6 Tomo Rinnegan state, he naturally knows that the green prayer beads are the power of yin and yang. In other words, it's actually another form of the power of 6 paths. This eye is called Tensigen, and it's the eye of the descendant of Otsutsuki Himura, the younger brother of Rakuto Sannin. The conditions for the birth of this eye are also extremely harsh. Tensigen is the same as Rinnegan. Pointing to the Tensigen in his right eye, Dustless smiled slightly, and deliberately explained it to his future third brother. Tensigen? Hearing this, Uchiha Sasuke frowned slightly. He really didn't know what Tensigen was, and he has never seen it, but Otsutsuki Himura is the younger brother of Rakuto Sannin, and his eyes are on the same level as Rinnegan. I'll show you now. After saying that, Dustless suddenly waved his hand, and the green prayer beads behind him suddenly gathered in front of him, forming a small disc that was faintly filled with a strong storm. Silver Wheel Reincarnation Explosion. Dustless shot out a giant whirlwind from his hand. The raging whirlwind absorbed everything in its path and devoured it to perfect itself, constantly expanding its size. When it got close to Uchiha Sasuke, it was a behemoth hundreds of meters long, and the area affected was almost several miles. What terrifying power! Ling! Uchiha Sasuke's eyes flashed with surprise as he stared at the 100-meter-long bijou. He felt the power of the bijou, and the hurricane that wanted to tear him into pieces. His surprise quickly turned into a dignified and resolute expression. The evil chakra's body instantly soared several dozen feet into the air. The huge body covered the sky, the purple giant's head reached the sky, and its feet stepped on the ground. It was mighty and unyielding, with wings on its back, holding 2 long swords in its hands, and wearing the terrible Tengu armor. It was extremely visually shocking. It was Uchiha Sasuke's ultimate body, Kinsusanoo. Bang bang bang. Kinsusanoo's feet moved, and the ground suddenly began to shake, interpreting the power and destruction to the limit. Every time Kinsusanoo took a step, the ground trembled with it. Even the air showed an unprecedented state of restraint due to the decadent and ancient temperament of Kinsusanoo. The sky was so small, and the earth was so unbearable. It's useless. With a disdainful smile, Uchiha Sasuke looked at the oncoming giant whirlwind, and his face was full of endless sarcasm, and immediately controlled the ultimate body, Kinsusanoo's huge body. The 2 ancient swords in his hands were raised high, and mercilessly roared down. Boom! The huge purple slash suddenly blasted out. erasing everything that came into contact with it along the way, and the ground was instantly pulled into a long and thick crack, and it went straight toward the whirlwind. Poochie. The sharp air wave directly scattered the 100-meter-long whirlwind, and the purple light easily penetrated it, and the air wave swept toward Dustless. The situation was rapidly deteriorating, and Dustless was going to die here. I underestimated you, kid. Murderous aura surged between his eyebrows. Wu Chen's eyes shot out a monstrous killing intent. His body turned into thousands of rays of light, illuminating everything in the world. He used the glint fruit to directly ignore the attack of Uchiha Sasuke's ultimate body, Kinsusanu. What a tricky ability. Seeing that Dustless easily ignored Kinsusanu's attack, Uchiha Sasuke raised his eyebrows slightly, and then looked at Dustless, who turned into a rainbow light and swept straight toward the sky. Uchiha Sasuke, who was in the ultimate body, Kinsusanu, was extremely calm, holding his hands in front of him, calm and collected. There was a sense of loneliness at the top. As expected of a master of disguise, I really can't compare with him. Dustless in the sky naturally saw the change in Uchiha Sasuke's demeanor, and the corners of his mouth also raised uncontrollably with a playful smile, thinking that Uchiha Sasuke deserved to be the second protagonist. Dustless can only look up to this fearless spirit. Idiot, you think the ultimate body Kinsusanu is invincible? Ridiculous. Looking contemptuously at Kinsusanu's extraordinary body, Dustless shook his head helplessly. The ultimate body Kinsusanu can scare ordinary people, such as the late-stage 5 Kage. But for Dustless, it's just a giant target. In other words, Uchiha Sasuke is an absolute target in a giant coffin. Chakra burst out of his body, and a huge aura of life overflowed from his body. Dustless crossed his arms, and the palms of his hands shone with a dazzling golden light, covering a vast and infinite range. His pupils suddenly opened, and a murderous aura roared out. Senjutsu. Yasakani no Magatama. Chapter 122. Light bullets rained down from the sky, and scrupulously roaring in the sky. The dense number of light bullets couldn't be captured at all, like a rainstorm changing the entire sky. The sky was dyed in a gorgeous golden color. Looking up, one could only see the endless flashes pouring down. In this case, it's difficult to find a place to not be covered, let alone escape unscathed. Good. Dense number. Looking up at the sky, Linger transformed into Uchiha Sasuke, after being sluggish for a long time, smacked his lips and muttered in disbelief, secretly smacking his lips. Looking at the dense number of raindrops, Susanu's huge body has indeed become the most suitable target. But even so, Uchiha Sasuke couldn't withdraw Kinsusanu. He could only rely on it to resist. Otherwise, the person who will be beaten into a sieve and be miserably dismembered may be himself. In such an environment, the ultimate body Kinsusanu can only resist. Uchiha Sasuke was not a fool. He immediately blocked Kinsusanu's arms in front of him, especially Kinsusanu's forehead. After all, he was in this position. Bang bang bang. Kinsusanu, bathed in the golden light bullets, became the target of devastation. The heavy armor on his body was constantly peeled off layer by layer, and his huge body was forcibly pushed back by the terrifying force. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Although Kinsusanu withstood a lot of light bullets, because the coverage of the light group was too large, it was inevitable that some would leak, and the ground became the target of slaughter. Looking around, there were countless holes in the ground, the size of a fist, like a bee's nest. There were holes everywhere, and they were connected to each other, showing how thoroughly destroyed it was. Damn it, hold on for me. Seeing Kinsusanu's outer armor, even his skin, and the meridians in his body were quickly peeled off layer by layer, Uchiha Sasuke's eyes flashed with unprecedented madness, and the evil purple chakra on his body rose again, constantly recasting and consolidating, repairing Kinsusanu's body, trying to delay the destruction of the golden light. In this way he would be safe and sound. This kid is pretty good. Kinsusanu's damaged body was constantly repaired, resisting the erosion of the golden light. As time passed, the golden light bullets were no longer as dense as before, and the biting cold offensive gradually weakened, until now, it completely stopped. Kinsusanu's body was destroyed many times during this period, but Uchiha Sasuke used the terrifying chakra to restore it. What a monster! That kind of chakra consumption, I'm afraid I can't use it that many times. Suddenly recalling Kinsusanu's body that was constantly destroyed and repaired, Dustless was speechless. He was worthy of being the one who received the gift of the 6 paths, and also the reincarnation of Indra. He was far superior in all aspects. If this is your unique skill, I'm sorry to tell you, then today you will die. In the restored Kinsusanu, Uchiha Sasuke coldly looked at Dustless, and the murderous intent in his eyes shot straight at Dustless like a blade. With your level, you talk big, but I'm afraid you don't have the teeth to do it. Are all the children of the concubines so arrogant nowadays? Turning a deaf ear to Uchiha Sasuke's words, Dustless looked at Uchiha Sasuke faintly, and then with a provocative face, he pointed his finger at him, signaling Uchiha Sasuke to come at him. Reckless thing, since you want to die so much, I'll help you. Seeing this, Uchiha Sasuke's face suddenly condensed into ice, and his murderous intent was revealed. Kinsusanu's body suddenly shook, and immediately, countless black runes poured into Kinsusanu's body, densely packed like ants, almost covering Kinsusanu's entire body. Glancing proudly at Dustless, Uchiha Sasuke suddenly shouted, and the cold tone made the temperature drop a lot, full of endless oppression. Senjutsu, Kinsusanu. Ayo. 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 As if it was given life, a ferocious roar came out of Kinsusanu's mouth, and the roar spread like a shock wave, and the ripples could be clearly seen in the endless void. As expected, the system's ability is truly heaven-defying and terrifying. This damned sparring. Heavily exhaling a mouthful of turbid air, Wu Chen's eyes then heavily looked at Susanu, which was covered with black veins all over its body, and the terrible thought in his heart was absolutely confirmed. As everyone knows, Uchiha Sasuke can't use the Senjutsu chakra at all, and the later Senjutsu, Kinsusanu, is the Senjutsu Kekkei Genkai after absorbing Yugo's chakra. Uchiha Sasuke himself didn't have this ability, but now he can use this jutsu, which means that all the characters in the system have retained their greatest strength when they were alive. Even if it's not their unique moves, even if it's a combination of moves, now it can be used without limit. In other words, even if Uchiha Sasuke summons the Kyuubi that doesn't belong to him now, he can also use it on Kinsusanu. Damn system. Dustless could only fiercely curse in his heart. This undoubtedly means that Uchiha Sasuke can now use 6 paths, Chibaku Tensei, and Indra's arrow alone. Whether it's a combination or not, as long as Uchiha Sasuke has used ninjutsu before, he can use it now. Bastard, what a blunder. Dustless's face was pale, and his whole body was cold. If it's really as he thought, maybe the one who will be crushed will be himself. I can only give it a try. The hesitation in his eyes was quickly replaced by madness. Dustless obviously intended to fight Uchiha Sasuke to the death, and his whole body was full of spirit. Chapter 123. Thinking quickly, Dustless's eyes flashed with a strange light. Thinking about it carefully, it's not like he has no chance of winning. Compared to Sasuke, who knows everything about his abilities, Kinsusanu doesn't know anything about his abilities, so he can have an unexpected effect. Uchiha Sasuke, you will be the first person to see me use the Tenseigen with all my strength. The green light that wrapped Dustless's whole body became stronger, even stronger than Otsutsuki Hagoromo on the moon. Pretentious, I'll tear off your clothes now. Linger transformed into Uchiha Sasuke and smiled contemptuously. Ultimate Susanoo suddenly flashed a purple bow, and at the same time he pulled the bow with all his strength, and an extremely sharp arrow whizzed towards his face. Idiot! Raising his eyelids, his eyes were calm, indifferent and calm, without any emotional fluctuations, and the world in his pupils was like stagnant water without vitality. Looking up, he saw Dustless indifferently raising his tender and slender right arm, and the palm of his right hand emitted a brilliant golden light, and immediately slashed forward. Golden Wheel Reincarnation Explosion. The golden light in Dustless's palm stretched for hundreds of meters in an instant, and Kinsusanu's arrow was broken, and the straight light stretched without limit, sweeping toward Madara and Kinsusanu. Pucci! This epic scene was unforgettable. The golden ray of light swept across, and the moment it came into contact with the senjutsu, Susanoo, it directly penetrated it, and the golden light passed through its body. Faintly, one could see that Susanoo's neck was casually cut, and the incision was dotted with golden light, and it didn't dissipate for a long time, as if it was permanently imprinted on it, and it couldn't be erased. Gotcha! Susanoo's huge body and head were directly cut in two. It's a pity that the distance is too far, and I can't completely control it. Otherwise, that kid would have been directly crushed like Susanoo. Helplessly shaking his head, Dustless sighed with disappointment, and his eyes were full of pity. Maybe if he moved a little more, Susanoo's body would have been cut. Compared to Dustless, who was full of disappointment, Uchiha Sasuke was stunned, and he turned his head and stared at Dustless in horror. He never felt that death was so close to him. Damn kid, don't show off. Seeing that Uchiha Sasuke was still in shock, with cold sweat on his forehead, and even the hair on his temples was sweaty, Dustless suddenly felt happy, and his face was flushed, and he was full of energy. According to Dustless's personal guess, Tenseigan is more inclined to attack, such as powerful moves like Golden Wheel Reincarnation Explosion, while Rinnegan is more inclined to seal, such as super powerful seals like Chibaku Tensei. Of course, Rinnegan still varies according to the individual's ability. In addition, Otsutsuki Kagaya's 9-Tomo Rinnegan, which is the legendary Rinnegan Sharingan, is also a special case. In short, there is nothing absolute in the world. One thing is certain, Tenseigan and Rinnegan have their own strengths and weaknesses, and they work together perfectly. It's really the perfect combination, and it also makes him more determined to defeat Uchiha Sasuke, take everything from him, and open his own Rinnegan. That move just now must be the so-called Tenseigan Jutsu. It's really not an ordinary eye. Staring at Dustless's right eye, Uchiha Sasuke thought calmly thinking about countermeasures. There was only a single color in his eyes, and only absolute reason. Let's test you with this move. The black energy ball formed by high-density chakra slowly flew from Uchiha Sasuke's hand to the sky. The dark ball's surface was covered with dark golden light, shrouded in unprecedented gravity, and the whole ground began to buzz and tremble. The ground trembled, like the organs in the human body, and it began to squirm. Chibaku Tensei. Amaterasu. Boom! In the endless void, the mysterious black ball was suddenly swallowed by the black ghost fire, and then violently exploded. A huge mushroom cloud swept across the distant sky, and the black smoke didn't dissipate for a long time. Bastard! Seeing this, Uchiha Sasuke roared angrily, and his voice was like thunder. His painstaking plan was instantly seen through by Dustless. How could he not be angry? You're angry over such a trivial matter. Looking at Uchiha Sasuke, Dustless immediately smiled and said, "Or are you saying that you have exhausted your talents? This is the best. I can also save some effort. After all, this is the same as the real world. If I get injured, I will also get injured in the real world. You're dreaming." Glancing at Dustless, Uchiha Sasuke sneered again and again, and a cold demonic smile appeared on his face. 1, 2, or even 3 Chibaku Tensei, you may be able to destroy them, but if this number is doubled, and it becomes 9, I'll see what you can do. At the end of his words, Uchiha Sasuke's expression suddenly changed, and his 6 Tomo Rinne eyes flashed with a thick murderous aura. His whole body was like a flood dam, and chakra was erupting freely. Chibaku Tensei. Boom, boom, boom. 9 black balls floated to the sky, and 6 black flames rose in the void. Although Dustless destroyed 6 balls in the first place, there were still 3 Chibaku Tensei that successfully avoided Dustless's attack. Kakaka. The 3 high-density black chakra balls suddenly erupted with a strong gravitational force, and the solid ground suddenly collapsed like a piece of paper, exposing the soil in the depths of the ground to the light of the eyes. As far as the eye could see, countless giant mountains were rushing toward the 3 black spheres in the sky, completely ignoring gravity. Chapter 124. As the most powerful seal of Rinnegan, Chibaku Tensei's power is beyond doubt, and Uchiha Sasuke, who has 6 Tomo Rinnegan, is able to exert the power of Chibaku Tensei to the fullest. In the blink of an eye, the world will collapse, the sun and the moon will become colorless, playing the meaning of the word destruction to the limit. The powerful eye power is far stronger than Uzumaki Nagato. Uchiha Sasuke can launch 9 Chibaku Tensei at once, and he's still strong. If it's Uzumaki Nagato, maybe he will die because of chakra. Where does this guy get his confidence? Following Uchiha Sasuke's gaze, he saw that Dustless's body was also attracted by the gravitational force of Chibaku Tensei, and his body began to slowly float up. However, what puzzled Uchiha Sasuke was that Dustless looked calm. Seeing that he was about to be swallowed by Chibaku Tensei, he didn't show the slightest fear. His temperament was steady and calm, which made Uchiha Sasuke frown slightly. Pretentious. After thinking for a while, Uchiha Sasuke's eyes condensed cold light, and then he just snorted, and then looked at Dustless with a cold expression, and chose to be silent. He looked at Dustless with an indifferent expression. I want to see what means you have to face the attack of 3 Chibaku Tensei and swim safely. Staring at Dustless, Uchiha Sasuke's eyes were in a trance, and then he quickly recovered his calmness, whispering to himself. Wu Chen's expression was rather calm. There was even a faint smile on his face, giving people the feeling of being bathed in the spring breeze. Especially the gentle and pleasant smile at the corners of his mouth. It was completely opposite to his usual murderous and cold style. It's worthy of the jutsu that can seal Otsutsuki Kagaya later. Looking up slightly, looking at the black beads above his head full of endless gravity, Dustless couldn't help but sigh. Although this can't be compared to the scale of Rakudo Chibaku Tensei, the gravitational force on it is enough to easily overturn everything. As far as the eye could see, the horizon had changed. But this kind of thing can't get rid of me. Staring at the terrifying black sphere, Dustless's lips curled into a cold smile. The materialized evil chakra gushed out and covered Dustless's body. Kensusanu, holding the katana of light, suddenly appeared and covered Dustless's body. The materialized giant was wearing the Tengu armor. Even though it wasn't as huge as Sasuke's ultimate body, in terms of momentum, it wasn't weaker than Sasuke's ultimate body. Explode. As Dustless's voice fell, Kensusanu's katana of light slashed towards the Chibaku Tensei. The entire horizon suddenly trembled, and a blazing wave of fire burst out, and an incomparably hot wave of air swept out like a wave. Is that his Kensusanu? How is that possible? How can a mature Kensusanu be so big? Seeing that the Chibaku Tensei was destroyed by Dustless's Kensusanu, transformed into Uchiha Sasuke didn't care much. He also thought that this trick couldn't get rid of Dustless. But what surprised him was that the mature Kensusanu's physique was really scary. It was just a little shorter than his ultimate body Kensusanu. There are still 2 left. Staring at the remaining 2 Chibaku Tensei still filled with irresistible gravity, Dustless and Kensusanu raised his eyebrows slightly, and then his body rushed forward. The katana of light was ready to be used and swept out. Boom! 2 golden airwaves suddenly shot out from the long blade. The sharp whistling sound made people's ears hurt. The golden luster cut through the thistles and thorns like the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves. It easily destroyed the 2 Chibaku heavenly stars. At a glance, there were only 3 blazing fires in the blue sky. It seems that your Rinnegan is just so. Looking at Uchiha Sasuke's face, Dustless chuckled leisurely, and his Tensigan rippled faintly and said faintly, Rinnegan is just so. I hope I can still be so leisurely and calm after this. Suppressing the burning anger in his heart, Uchiha Sasuke could be said to be burning with anger. Even if he hid it well, anyone could see his anger, and immediately said to Dustless in a cold voice, if you want to destroy him, first make him crazy. Seeing this, Dustless laughed in his heart. Uchiha Sasuke's temper is quite impulsive, and now he saw that the strongest seal of Rinnegan was easily broken by him. For the extremely arrogant and conceited Uchiha Sasuke, Dustless's move has completely angered him, and now it's completely adding fuel to the fire. The characters in the system are almost exactly the same as in the real world, whether it's personality or strength, there is no change. This kid's eye of reincarnation is really strong. Although Dustless showed that Uchiha Sasuke was extremely disdainful, he had to admit that Uchiha Sasuke's 6-tomo Rinnegan is indeed great, and he can launch 9 consecutive Chibaku Tensei in the state of one eye at the same time. Whoosh! The sound of the air breaking sounded, and the blazing fire could be felt from far away. Looking up, the scene reflected in his eyes was a black arrow whistling through the air, flashing with a dark light, revealing a blazing fire that could devour everything. And its power was very powerful. This is the ability of his eternal Mangekyo. It seems that he can control Amaterasu's mentality, and turn Amaterasu into any form according to his will. Frowning slightly, Wuchen stared at the black arrow flying towards him. He was not afraid at all. He gently raised his right arm, opened his 5 fingers, and shot out a repulsive force towards Amaterasu's black arrow. Boom! The black arrow formed by Amaterasu suddenly burst and fell to the ground like raindrops. Not to mention hurting Dustless, it was extremely difficult to get close to him. Chapter 125. Dustless only got the Tensigen a short time ago, and just like Sasuke's Rinnegan, it's also a monocular state. However, Dustless has long been familiar with the flexible application of the Tensigen, and most of its abilities have been completely and perfectly mastered. Now it's just the basic ability of controlling the repulsion force. Dustless naturally has no problem, and he easily scattered the Amaterasu into countless black dots. Tensigen, both offensive and defensive, and its pure attack power is even stronger than Rinnegan. Gazing at the scattered Amaterasu, the surprise in Sasuke's eyes disappeared, and he calmed down and looked at Dustless solemnly. I've played enough. In fact, it's just a matter of a moment to deal with you. Looking at Dustless's face without a smile, Sasuke's indifferent tone suddenly changed, and he looked at Dustless with an extremely serious expression. The confidence he showed made Dustless stunned, as if he was sure that he could defeat him. Don't talk nonsense. If you have the ability, just do it. Frowning, Dustless waved his hand impatiently, and said with a displeased expression, indicating Sasuke to do it. No matter what ninjutsu in this world, there are weaknesses. Even my Rinnegan is no exception. Ignoring Dustless's impatience, Sasuke said to himself, the so-called ninjutsu have unknown weaknesses and loopholes. My Rinnegan is no exception, and your so-called Tensigen is no exception. Looking at Wuchen's Tensigen, Uchiha Sasuke, who was usually silent, was extraordinarily talkative at this moment, and continued, I can see that your Tensigen belongs to the type that is extremely powerful in physical attack. What do you want to say? Slightly frowning, Wuchen's handsome face remained calm and asked indifferently. He always felt that Uchiha Sasuke's tone was insinuating, with a different meaning. In other words, the Tensigen represents absolute power, and other aspects are extremely weak, such as this. With a cold smile, Sasuke sneered gloomily, and the 6-tomo Rinnegan swayed strongly, and the majestic spiritual fluctuations directly poured into Dustless's mind. Dustless's eyes turned into circles of Rinnegan. Obviously, he was hit by the Rinnegan Genjutsu. In the unknown world, there was a white mist, like the beginning of the world, and the light was particularly dim. Allay. It seems that I was careless. I forgot that when the kid was born with the Rinnegan, he also got some unknown Genjutsu. In the strange world, a rather helpless voice sounded. Dustless touched his forehead in distress, and secretly scolded himself for being careless and negligent, which allowed Sasuke's plot to succeed. However, as Sasuke said, Dustless's Tensigen has no way to defend against these Genjutsu. And as he said, you can't have your cake and eat it too. The Tensigen has the power to destroy everything, and resisting Genjutsu is really not a compliment. Perhaps this is one of the weaknesses of the Tensigen. Of course, Dustless doesn't know whether Otsutsuki's Tensigen can resist Genjutsu. After all, the ability of Tensigen varies from person to person. Well, I hope you can still be so optimistic when I tear you to pieces. Uchiha Sasuke came out of the void like a ghost. Dustless said that the situation was not optimistic, but anyone could hear that Dustless didn't care. It's a very powerful Genjutsu. Looking at the almost boundless world around him from the corner of his eyes, Dustless praised generously. Facing such a terrifying genjutsu, he really can't solve it for the time being. Don't worry, I won't let you die so easily. Cold killing intent surged in Linger's eyes. Uchiha Sasuke, who had transformed into Ling, revealed his killing intent and said coldly, "You can treat this as an illusion that is countless times stronger than Tsukuyomi. Everything in this world is under my control. In this world, I am the god of creation." Uchiha Sasuke said with unruly hatred. "Is that so?" Hearing this, Dustless just smiled with relief, without too much emotional fluctuation. His eyes were filled with calmness, as if Uchiha Sasuke in the genjutsu world had switched places with him. "Humph. Now I will let you understand the horror of this Rinnegan genjutsu." The killing intent in his eyes condensed into ice, and Uchiha Sasuke sneered. Immediately, under Dustless's gaze, Uchiha Sasuke suddenly stared at Dustless's right arm. Kacha. Intense pain spread all over his body. Dustless was taken aback and subconsciously looked at his right arm. Not bad. The scene that came into view was quite miserable. Dustless's right arm had been completely twisted, like a twisted dough twist, and the bones were no longer formed. "This is just an appetizer, enjoy it." As Uchiha Sasuke's voice fell, Dustless's left arm was also twisted, and the difference between the bones and flesh could no longer be distinguished. An unprecedented pain spread throughout his body like a tide. Dustless's delicate little face instantly turned as pale as paper, and his body fell to the ground like a kite with a broken string. This feeling should be unforgettable for a lifetime. Seeing that Dustless's arms had been completely twisted, Uchiha Sasuke stepped forward and looked at Dustless, who fell to the ground and was about to lose consciousness. Without hesitation, he pulled out the Kusanagi sword from his waist. The cold light reflected in Dustless's eyes, and the former's eyes were full of despair. Just glancing at Dustless, Uchiha Sasuke didn't have the slightest mercy. After a long while, Dustless's entire body was dripping with blood. Finally dead. Seeing the bloody holes all over Dustless's body, including his breathing and heartbeat, Uchiha Sasuke took back his Kusanagi sword. "It took a lot of effort, finally. Pucci, you finally killed me, but I'm sorry you are too weak." Uchiha Sasuke turned around and saw Dustless with a sly smile, and at the same time, a golden sword was inserted into Uchiha Sasuke's abdomen. It was Dustless holding the Kusanagi sword with a smile on his face. Chapter 126. Lowering his head, Uchiha Sasuke looked at the golden sword that penetrated his abdomen. His eyes were dull, then he looked up and saw Dustless's cold face with a fox-like sneer. His pupils instantly dilated, and his mind was like paste. He instantly lost the ability to think. Impossible. Resisting the urge to vomit blood in his heart, Uchiha Sasuke clenched his teeth and broke free from the sword. The stinging and burning pain suddenly spread from his abdomen to every corner of his body. Dustless was just stabbed to death by him. Uchiha Sasuke still remembered the scene of hundreds of bloody holes in his body. Impossible? What makes you think it's impossible? Looking at Uchiha Sasuke with a faint smile on his face, Dustless asked with interest. His tone was full of disdain. "It's ridiculous to think that you're omnipotent. Because this world was created by me, and I am an omnipotent god." Ignoring Dustless's sarcasm, Uchiha Sasuke recovered. Dustless's pierced abdomen healed in a blink of an eye. Then he looked at the indifferent Dustless gloomily. When he said the word God, he deliberately emphasized the word, for fear that Dustless couldn't understand what he meant. "Is that so, the world you created as a god? How can you be hurt by me?" Dustless asked, looking at the gloomy Uchiha Sasuke with disdain. His face was full of contempt, and with endless sneer. "A world created by genjutsu dares to call itself a god. It's really ridiculous." And as Uchiha Sasuke said before, all genjutsu created by human beings have loopholes. Dustless's Tensigen does have weaknesses, but Uchiha Sasuke's Rinnegan genjutsu also has weaknesses. It's ridiculous for him to regard himself as a special existence. I might as well tell you, I can ignore any genjutsu in the world, no exception to genjutsu. Only physical attacks can affect me. Giving Uchiha Sasuke a sympathetic look, Dustless told the truth. Uchiha Sasuke's Rinnegan Genjutsu is not a common thing. Dustless still remembers that after sealing Otsutsuki Kagaya, Uchiha Sasuke and Uzumaki Naruto had a shocking battle. At that time, Sasuke just casually glanced at the nine-tailed beasts and completely controlled them, and then used Chibaku Tensei to seal them. It can be seen how terrifying Uchiha Sasuke's Rinnegan Genjutsu is. Genjutsu. Let's see if your ability is really that great. Uchiha Sasuke was furious when he heard this. He was so angry that he didn't care about any bullshit tactics. As the god of creation of this world, everything in the world was under his control. He could destroy Dustless with a flick of his finger. Crack! With a wave of his hand, a hurricane swept over and instantly split Wu Chen's body into several pieces. It was a clean and thorough dismemberment. You're just an ant. Seeing this, Uchiha Sasuke curled his lips, his face full of disdain. You're the one who made a mistake. The ghostly voice sounded again. Dustless's Genjutsu body recovered and looked at Uchiha Sasuke, who was stunned. It seems that you, the god who created the world, is not very useful. You can't kill me, an intruder. Dustless's mocking voice was filled with endless ridicule. He was extremely disgusted with Uchiha Sasuke. This should be his Mangekyo or his Tensigen ability. Uchiha Sasuke's face was livid, his fists clenched, and his eyes were fixed on Dustless's foxy smile. He was so depressed that he vomited blood. The world in front of him is equivalent to the infinitely magnified Tsukuyomi world. Its power is much stronger than Tsukuyomi. As the god of creation in Tsukuyomi world, he can be ridiculed by Dustless. A jutsu that can ignore any genjutsu. Bastard! How can such a ninjutsu exist? Uchiha Sasuke's face was extremely ugly. A jutsu that can ignore any genjutsu in the world is beyond the scope of ninjutsu. It seems that you're at your wit's end. The so-called god of creation is really disappointing. Slightly raising his eyelids, Dustless deliberately emphasized the word, god of creation. He stretched his tone, fearing that Uchiha Sasuke couldn't understand what he meant. Goodbye. The so-called god of creation, Tsukuyomi. Pucci. In the outside world, Uchiha Sasuke suddenly began to vomit blood. His handsome smiling face became pale like paper. He couldn't bear the burden, and knelt on the ground with half of his leg. His bright eyes dimmed, full of hesitation. Suddenly, the corner of his mouth raised a self-deprecating smile. Uchiha Sasuke's face was even more embarrassed. I'm afraid that he's the first person to use Rinnegan Genjutsu and get backfired on by the opponent. What is that guy pursuing in his heart? How could he give birth to such a ninjutsu? Looking at the expressionless Dustless, who seemed to be out of tune with the whole world, Uchiha Sasuke said incredulously, any dojutsu is almost inextricably linked to the host's heart. Dustless can have such an unheard of jutsu, which shows exactly what his heart wants. Seeing Uchiha Sasuke looking at himself in horror, Dustless's mouth raised a smile without a trace. In fact, the jutsu he just showed was a ninjutsu born from Mangekyo's right eye after he merged with Hashirama's cells. Although this jutsu is extremely heaven-defying, Dustless didn't care, because it only belongs to the category of passive defense. There is no one who can make Dustless defend passively, so he hasn't used it, and it's only effective against genjutsu. I might as well tell you the jutsu just now is called omniscient and omnipotent. The principle is just like its literal meaning. Any ninjutsu that I know can't hurt me. Of course, only those who are immune to it, such as genjutsu, are immune to physical attacks. Dustless said honestly. It's okay to tell Uchiha Sasuke, anyway, he's just a simulation character. Staring at the sluggish face of Uchiha Sasuke, Dustless said in a deep voice, whether it's Koto Amatsukami Izanami or Infinite Tsukuyomi, these jutsu that I know can't affect me. As the name says, omniscient and omnipotent, know everything, ignore everything. Chapter 127. To be fair, Dustless really doesn't value this jutsu much. Even if he is very powerful and can ignore any ability he knows, whether it's the so-called Infinite Tsukuyomi, the strongest genjutsu Koto Amatsukami, or even Izanami, but in the end it's a passive defense. Dustless is not the kind of person who is passive defense. There are only a few people who can make Dustless adopt a passive defense strategy. Well, the next step is how to take everything from you. Murderous intent flashed in his eyes, and his sharp eyes stared at Uchiha Sasuke on the ground. Dustless's heart couldn't help but jump to his throat. Once Uchiha Sasuke is completely killed, it means that he will take everything from him and inherit his identity as Indra's reincarnation. Dustless's body also implanted Hashirama's cells, which means that it is possible to evolve again after taking Uchiha Sasuke's 6th Tomo Rinnegan. Whoosh! A black shadow suddenly fell. Dustless was slightly stunned, staring at the fragments of clothes floating at his feet. His eyes flashed. Uchiha Sasuke used 6 Tomo Rinnegan's jutsu, heavenly hand power, to attack him. "Get out of my way!" Dustless suddenly shouted. His voice was like rolling thunder, and at the same time, a strong repulsive force broke out of his body and directly bounced Uchiha Sasuke's sword. What a powerful force! Uchiha Sasuke flew back dozens of feet, barely supporting his body, pinching his numb right arm, and then looked at Dustless with a heavy heart. Summoning Jutsu, Kyubi. Manjikyu Sharingan flashed decisively, and Uchiha Sasuke didn't hesitate to summon Kyubi. Its huge orange body was almost the same size as the mountain, and the behemoth with 9 tails was exposed in front of Dustless. Its scarlet eyes were filled with endless killing intent, and its sharp claws could easily pierce through everything in the world. Its strong and powerful arms were filled with explosive power. Why is there a Kyubi? Looking at the summoning of Kyubi, Dustless was extremely speechless. He can understand that Uchiha Madara has Kyubi, but what does Kyubi have to do with Uchiha Sasuke? Is it because Uchiha Sasuke once joined forces with Uzumaki Naruto to summon Kyubi? Forget it, let nature take its course. He smiled bitterly and comforted himself. Dustless knew that this was the perverted part of the system. No matter what trick, no matter whether it was related to Uchiha Sasuke or not, as long as it was used, Uchiha Sasuke can use it in the world of the system. Because this Uchiha Sasuke himself was transformed from the system Ling. He was omnipotent, including the psychic Kyubi. Kensusunu. Under Wu Chen's astonished gaze, Ninetails put on the purple armor. Her aura was even more piercingly cold. Her physique was undoubtedly bigger and more powerful. Kyubi, wearing Kensusunu, held a black long sword in his hand, which was made by Uchiha Sasuke using Amaterasu. He didn't need to think about what would happen if he was hit by the black big sword. It's really a tricky technique. Dustless looked at the huge Kyubi cautiously, and his heart inevitably sank. His eyes solidified, and he vigilantly looked at Uchiha Sasuke standing on top of Kyubi's head. Ao ao ao. A deafening roar came out of Kyubi's mouth, as if to celebrate his breaking out of the prison and the joy of seeing the sun again. Kyubi's chakra went berserk, and his feet slammed on the ground, and the whole ground suddenly trembled. Woo-woo! The sawtooth mouth full of fangs opened, and a black energy ball formed in an instant. The high-density chakra energy ball was huge, and the aura of destruction around it made people unconsciously desperate. So big. Feeling the hurricane thrown out by the high-speed rotation of the giant Bijidama, Dustless's face changed slightly, and he was very cautious, staring at the expanding energy ball, and his eyes flashed with a touch of determination. Uchiha Fire Formation. Boom. A crimson flame wall emerged from Kyubi's feet, and the high temperature of the flame barrier instantly exploded the Bijidama, that Kyubi painstakingly condensed, and it suddenly burst open and swallowed Kyubi's body. What a thick turtle shell. Looking through the heavy black smoke, Dustless clearly saw the Kensusunu on Kyubi's body, and all the power of the explosion just now was isolated from Kyubi's body. The ultimate body Kensusunu's defense was beyond doubt, and the only time it was completely broken was during the battle between Uchiha Madara and Hashirama in the Valley of the End. Kacha. Kyubi, who was blown away by the explosion of the Bijidama, immediately rushed forward, and the sharp sword in his hand poured down, destroying Dustless's Uchiha Fire Formation. You're going to die. Looking contemptuously at the barrier that was destroyed by Kyubi's overwhelming power, Sasuke seemed to have regained his confidence after being trampled on. Then he looked down at Wuchun with disdain and affection on his face. You don't understand human feelings, boy. Seeing this, Dustless just touched his nose, and didn't feel any surprise, because Uchiha Sasuke is such a proud and conceited person. Of course, with his current strength he indeed has the ability to despise Dustless. In that case, I will completely erase you and the Kyuubi under your feet. After observing the Kyuubi under Sasuke's feet for a while, Dustless's murderous intent burst out, and the murderous intent in his words made people tremble. Anyway, even if this Kyuubi has nothing to do with the real world, it's just a simulation of the system, it's not a big deal if it dies. Take this. With Dustless's angry shout, several green beads suddenly appeared in front of him, rotating with a distance between each other, and the size of a disc. It was full of endless ominous. That trick again. This guy can't use that without limit, damn it. Doesn't he have dojutsu restrictions? Seeing this, Sasuke's face slightly changed, and his face became ugly. At the same time, Dustless's cold voice resounded through the sky. Golden Wheel Reincarnation Explosion. Chapter 128. Feeling the endless sharpness of the golden light beam, Uchiha Sasuke's face changed, and his eyelids couldn't help but twitch. Anyone can see the hidden fear in his eyes. The move in front of him is obviously a dojutsu, and the power is extremely great, enough to easily split the world. It can be imagined that the amount of dojutsu consumed is definitely much more than Chibaku Tensei. However, what made Uchiha Sasuke speechless is that Dustless is too much of a monster. The previous battle should have consumed a lot of dojutsu, and now he can use such a shocking move like Golden Wheel Reincarnation Explosion. It seems that there is no limit at all. It seems that I can only fight hard. His eyes suddenly emitted a burst of light. Uchiha Sasuke's eyes surged with killing intent. Facing the golden light beam in Dustless's hand, his face was full of eagerness. Obviously, Uchiha Sasuke is obviously not the kind of lamb that likes to wait for death. Oh, good fighting spirit. Feeling the strong fighting spirit of Uchiha Sasuke, Dustless smiled, and then his eyes slightly narrowed, and the light from his eyes was extremely dangerous. Combined with Dustless's aura, it really made people feel extremely oppressed and afraid. Whoosh! The golden light beam stretched without limit. Although it was only the size of a thumb, the bright afterglow covered the entire system world, and the sharpness of the light beam made people tremble. So long. Looking at the endless light, even with Uchiha Sasuke's calm mentality, he couldn't help but secretly smack his tongue. His face was horrified, his eyes were extremely unnaturally enlarged, and even the corner of his mouth was slightly trembling. Although he had seen it twice before, facing this light beam that covered the whole world, Uchiha Sasuke's heart couldn't help but feel small, as if he encountered an unprecedented natural enemy, making him extremely uncomfortable. Whoosh! The black shadow suddenly slid down rapidly, and suddenly looked up. It was Dustless with a cold face, controlling the golden light beam to sweep the Kyuubi under Sasuke's beast disaster. The golden light revealed its sharpness, crushing everything in its path with an unstoppable momentum, as if it was looking down on all living things. Along the way, several giant mountains that were thousands of meters tall were directly cut in half, easily piercing through them as if they were pieces of paper. It directly whistled towards the side of the nine-tailed beast's calamity. From the looks of it, it wanted to completely split the nine-tailed beast's body in half, just like how it cut the mountain in half before. We have to stop it. On top of Kyuubi's head, Uchiha Sasuke's pupils suddenly shrank. He smelled a strong sense of death from that unstoppable light. Ha! A huge purple longbow suddenly appeared in Kyuubi's hand, and the black arrow made of Amaterasu was clearly visible. Kyuubi's face was ferocious, and his strong arm pulled the bowstring to the limit, and shot it with the most ferocious force. So, the big hand that tightly pulled the bowstring suddenly loosened, and the black arrow suddenly shot out, going up against the current, and the friction in the air made a white wave. Overconfident, trying to shake the world with the power of floater, this is unrealistic. Seeing the black arrow roaring out with ferocious momentum, it was not difficult to see that it wanted to break Dustless's golden wheel reincarnation explosion. trying to delay the attack of the light beam on Kyubi. Ridiculous. Slightly shaking his head, Dustless looked at the two attacks that were about to collide. The black arrow cut through the void and inevitably collided with the light beam. However, what surprised everyone was that the two tyrannical forces didn't explode and cancel each other out. The golden light instantly swallowed the black arrow that came in contact with it. Bastard! Uchiha Sasuke's mouth twitched fiercely, and then he didn't hesitate to escape from the beast's disaster and jumped into the sky, his eyes fixed on the sweeping light beam, and his face was full of horror. Pucci! The Susanoo wrapped around the Kyubi was easily torn apart like clothes. It couldn't withstand a single blow, and the ultimate form Susanoo that gave the world supreme pressure was instantly annihilated and cut off. Ken Susanoo's Kyubi also couldn't escape death. Under Uchiha Sasuke's stunned gaze, he saw the straight golden light passing through Kyubi's orange body, and Kyubi's body was easily divided, along with the ultimate body Ken Susanoo. It was cut in half. Boom! Kyubi's upper body, which was cut in half, fell to the ground like a mountain, and the ground trembled fiercely, raising smoke and dust. This guy actually killed Kyubi. Looking at the cut Kyubi in disbelief, Uchiha Sasuke's pupils dilated and lost their bright color. No wonder he was so surprised after all. This was Kyubi's first real death. Don't show such a surprised expression. Don't worry, I'll send you to accompany him. On the ground, Dustless's body glowed with a golden luster, crossing layers of space, and when he reappeared, he was already beside Uchiha Sasuke, and the Kusanagi sword in his hand swept across. The cold light was about to cut him into pieces. Clang! At this critical moment, Uchiha Sasuke pulled out the Kusanagi sword from his waist to block Dustless's attack. The huge force from his arm made him slightly stunned. He didn't expect Dustless's strength to be so great, and looking at Dustless's calm appearance, it was obvious that he didn't use all his strength. Laser! Dustless didn't have any surprise when he saw this, and he flicked the golden light beam. Pucci! Caught off guard, or even unable to react, Uchiha Sasuke's chest and arm were directly penetrated by the burning light beam, and he could clearly see the small hole and the sky on the other side. Lightspeed kick. Boom! Boom! The strong and powerful leg bombarded Uchiha Sasuke's body, and suddenly his chest caved in. And then he slammed heavily on the ground, creating a deep pit. Chapter 129. Dustless looked at the half-dead Uchiha Sasuke expressionlessly, waved his hand, and countless golden light poured down. His vitality is quite strong. Feeling Sasuke's weak breathing, Dustless's eyes flashed with surprise, and suddenly a tiredness that he had never felt before poured into his mind. Dustless's vision was blurred, and his eyes were slightly stinging, so Dustless subconsciously closed his eyes. After fusing with Hashirama's cells, this was the first time he felt this physical exhaustion. Is this the side effect of overusing dojutsu? It's really a long-lost feeling. Dustless's arm gently rubbed the corner of his eyes, and when he opened his eyes again, his eyeballs were covered with blood, like a spider's web, swallowing the entire eyeball. Both eyes were the same, especially the tensigen in the right eye, red and blue mixed with each other, and it was particularly terrifying. Ken Susanoo Chidori. Seeing Dustless's tiredness after using his dojutsu, Sasuke seized the opportunity to rush towards Dustless. Ken Susanoo's hand flashed with dazzling lightning, making it impossible to look directly at it. You think I overused my dojutsu, so you want to sneak attack me? Stupid! Dustless's voice was filled with endless chill and sneer. It's too ridiculous to think that he can't do anything to Sasuke because of his excessive dojutsu. Uchiha Flame Formation. Boom. The ultimate body Ken Susanoo's huge body was not easy to move, and Dustless's attack was a sudden attack, so naturally, it was inevitable that he had a close contact with the flame barrier. The heavy armor was suddenly melted by the blazing flame wall, and quickly peeled off layer by layer, and Ken Susanoo was about to turn into ashes. Break for me! Accompanied by Sasuke's roar, Ken Susanoo's right hand's Chidori bombarded the flame barrier, and the flame barrier that dyed the sky red immediately burst, and the sky was clear again. Good opportunity! Dustless's pupil suddenly burst out, because of the melting of Consisinu before. His defense was much weaker than before, and even the left half of his arm was completely melted. Silver Wheel Reincarnation Explosion. Whoosh! The huge tornado swept out unscrupulously, and it swept straight towards Consisinu, who was already dying. Dustless's chakra was almost exhausted, and its range was naturally larger than before. Ninjutsu has no limit, it is completely different for the caster. Dustless injected chakra without reservation, and the giant tornado became larger as a result, like a spring in the deep sea, crazily swallowing everything around it. After fighting for half a day, Dustless's dojutsu power reached its limit, and so did Uchiha Sasuke. At this moment, the ultimate body Susanoo was completely swallowed by the hurricane. Puchi Puchi. The moment the tornado shrouded, Kinsusanoo was like being cut by hundreds of millions of blades at the same time, and his defense completely collapsed and dissipated. In just a few breaths, he was completely swept away, and Sasuke was soon exposed to the tornado. The same scene played out as Kinsusanoo. It seems that the kid is finally dead. Seeing Sasuke's flesh and blood flying everywhere, Dustless was relieved, and casually found a place to sit on the ground, looking dispirited and listless. It seems that Dustless also reached his limit. As for Sasuke, he became a pile of white bones. It's really a complete destruction. Dustless saw this and took a deep breath. Originally, Silver Wheel Reincarnation Explosion didn't have this kind of power, but because he injected chakra without reservation, this technique produced a qualitative change and gave Sasuke a fatal blow. In other words, suddenly remembering that Sasuke was completely destroyed by himself, Dustless's eyes were full of light, and he realized that he will soon inherit everything. This is, inside the body, suddenly warm power flowed out, wandering around the meridians, moistening Dustless's body. This strange and familiar energy was quite strange, and there was a feeling of enlightenment in his heart. It was very similar to Dustless's blood. This is the power of Uchiha Sasuke. Gently closing his eyes, carefully savoring the amazing changes in his body. After coming to this world for so many years, Dustless was relieved. Only by having Rinnegan and Tensegan at the same time, Dustless can sit back and relax. After all, the strength of the late-stage characters is obvious to all. They are either Rikudo level or quasi-Rikudo. Although Dustless is extremely conceited, he is not confident that he will be invincible against them, let alone defeat them completely. And there is also the existence of Otsutsuki Kagaya, who is known as the god of creation. It's so itchy. Dustless subconsciously rubbed his eyes. He felt itchy in his eye sockets as if something had grown out. It was filled with strong vitality and an indescribable throbbing he had never felt before. Dustless can't tell the specific feeling. No, the Mangekyo of the left and right eyes has strengthened. After carefully feeling for a while, Dustless suddenly opened his eyes, ecstatically, and even with a rare tremor in his voice, he can clearly feel that his Mangekyosei power has increased in an instant, and it is completely different from before. It is not an exaggeration to say that it is a dimensional gap. It seems that it has become Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. Although the shape of the Mangekyo in Dustless's left eye has not changed, the eye power has been different, and it has exceeded the level of Mangekyo Sharingan. It is worthy of the name Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. This is. His left eye suddenly swayed with stronger energy fluctuations, even stronger than the Mangekyo that was born just now. The blood was dense, and the violent chakra was surging in the eye socket, and the eyeball was about to burst. Dustless can clearly feel that his left eye has turned purple, and a circle of mysterious black ripples spread from it, and there are some black tomo hanging from it. Chapter 130. Dustless's left eye was unusually itchy, as if tens of thousands of ants were biting it. The pain was unbearable, and he couldn't help but grab his left eye. "Don't worry, your left eye is evolving." A light voice stopped Dustless's action. She looked up slightly. It was Ling, who was devastatingly beautiful. She was wearing a simple and elegant dress. Her 3,000 deep black willow hair danced in the wind. Her slender figure was like the breeze of time, which couldn't be touched. She was exceptionally ethereal, as if she had walked out of a painting. She gave people a feeling of a goddess above the ninth heaven. Even today, I still feel this way. Raising his eyelids and glancing at Ling, Dustless shook his head. No matter when Ling gave him the feeling of looking at flowers in the fog, there's always a layer of fog, and he couldn't completely see through her, and her whole body was covered with a mysterious veil. Shaking his head, Dustless could only smile bitterly. The so-called Tensigan's super insight ability couldn't see through Ling. This is not a gap in distance, but a gap in strength. Of course, I can feel that my left eye is evolving. Dustless glanced at Ling, and he could naturally feel the 6 black tomo in his left eye, as well as the purple pupil. These were the spoils of war after he defeated Uchiha Sasuke. He took everything from Uchiha Sasuke. But then again, feeling that his left eye was a pure 6 tomo Rinnegan, Dustless frowned slightly and wondered. I already have the identity of Indra's reincarnation, and at the same time, I have Ajura's chakra in my body, and when the 2 chakra touch, the power of the 6 paths will be born. Now, as Indra's reincarnation, I should awaken Rinnegan. Dustless's face was full of confusion. It's reasonable to say that this is only Uchiha Sasuke's Rinnegan, and his own Rinnegan hasn't been born yet. This will take time. Don't forget, after Uchiha Madara implanted Hashirama's flesh, it took many years to awaken Rinnegan. Glancing at Dustless, Ling faintly explained. That's true. Although he felt that Ling words were perfunctory, the fact was that when Madara opened his Rinnegan, he was indeed 100 years old. I'm afraid that no one in the world will be your match in the future. Ling stared deeply into Dustless's eyes as she calmly explained. Her tone seemed to hold Dustless in high esteem, but in Dustless's eyes, it had a different meaning. Who knows? Dustless glanced at Ling, and then stood up. He moved his body slightly, and the sound of bones cracking could be heard. His eyes were indifferent as he stared at the void in front of him. His clear eyes flickered with an elusive light. In the rain-hidden village, in an unknown secret room. Dustless, what happened to you? Who could injure you like this? Looking at the battered and exhausted Wuxian, Otsutsuki Yulua frowned slightly. She circled around Wuxian, and immediately touched her chin with her slender fingers. She said in disbelief, "What kind of person can make you like this?" Although Dustless didn't have any wounds on his body, his face was pale, and his eyes were dull, as if he had just recovered from a serious illness. His temperament was abnormal, with a sense of dispiritedness. Taking a glance at Wuxian, Otsutsuki Haruo carefully helped him to sit down, looking like a pretty girl from a humble family, without the usual indifference. This made Dustless feel a little flattered. "I'm fine. It's just that my eye power was severely overdrawn." Waving his hand, he signaled Otsutsuki Yukaro not to worry. Wuxian immediately smiled, giving people a feeling of gentleness. After the battle with Uchiha Sasuke in the system, Dustless's eyes still hadn't recovered, and his physical condition was not good. His eyes were damaged in the system, and the same was true in the real world. Where did that kid Obito go? He's not learning ninjutsu from that old guy Uchiha Madara again, is he? Kuroda was speechless and asked Haguro. Since Obito was pulled into hell by him, he didn't give up on practicing ninjutsu. He worked very hard, thinking all day long about when to attack Konoha. Isn't this all your fault? That Uzumaki Nagato is the same. Rolling her eyes, Haguro gave Dustless a big supercilious look. Yahiko was deliberately killed under Dustless's indifference. Therefore, Uzumaki Nagato fell into the devil's path, and became completely desperate in the real world. Rin was also controlled by Dustless, and then she was killed. And Obito, who she saw with her own eyes, was completely corrupted. So Dustless took Madara's part and dominated everything. Isn't that good? As long as this is the case, they will obey my orders. Dustless chuckled and shrugged casually. He didn't care about this. Anyway, if he didn't do this, Madara would do it in the future. What are you going to do next? Staring at Dustless's eyes, Haguro whispered. I'm afraid that Obito will attack Konoha soon. Speaking of this, Otsutsuki Hagoromo's voice stopped. Although Obito's strength has improved rapidly, especially under Madara's guidance, He is still not an opponent of Yellow Flash Minato. Let him go. That kid won't calm down if he doesn't vent his anger and turn Konoha upside down. Dustless's eyes were deep and long. Obito was still useful to him. Frowning slightly, he whispered, "When the time comes, I'll go to Konoha with Obito." Although Obito was safe in the end, just in case, Dustless chose to accompany him to Konoha. It would be best to recover the Kyuubi. Now the Hachibi is in his hands, and so is the Geromazo. It's really a headache. I hope that little Tanuki doesn't get killed. Now the only one of the nine-tailed beasts whose whereabouts was unknown was Ichibi Shikaku. If he didn't take care to kill it, then even if Wuchin wanted to cry, he wouldn't have a place to cry. He could only silently pray that this little raccoon cat would survive this disaster. Resurrecting the Jubi is essential. Chapter 131. It's no wonder that Dustless is so worried about the safety of the Ichibi. After all, it's related to the resurrection of the Jubi. Although he can find chakra, no one in the world has Ichibi's chakra. Let's just go with the flow. Shaking his head gently, Dustless no longer entangled this issue. Whether the Ichibi is dead or not, it's not something he can control at the moment. There are still many things for him to do. Dustless doesn't want to spend time on this kind of problem that only God knows. Your dojutsu hasn't recovered yet. It's better for me to go to Konoha instead of you. Her beautiful watery eyes looked seriously at Dustless's pale face. Otsutsuki Haguro said worriedly. Dustless is her hope to revive the Otsutsuki clan in the future. Of course, this flower of hope can't wither before it blooms. Don't worry. Looking at Otsutsuki Haguro with a comforting look, Dustless chuckled and said, "Even if my eyes are blind, Senju Hashirama is reborn. Konoha can come and go as I please." When talking about Senju Hashirama, Dustless's mouth swept a contemptuous smile. Even if he is resurrected, Dustless can easily defeat him. Not to mention that Dustless's dojutsu is only temporarily overdrawn. Do as you wish. Seeing that Wuchen was so determined, especially his confident and exultant look, it was like a shot in the arm. It made Yuluo silent. She just stood beside Wuchen quietly. She usually gave people the impression of being cold, but this was the first time she was so well behaved. At this time, Otsutsuki Haguro was a feast for the eyes. The elegant and natural fragrance rushed into his ears and nose. Dustless was suddenly stunned. Like poison, his eyes were dazed. "Dustless, you." Perceiving Dustless's abnormality, Otsutsuki Haguro's face also changed slightly. Being stared at by Dustless, she was quite embarrassed, even though they were already husband and wife. Cough, cough, cough. Sorry, I was distracted for a while. Dustless's old face was slightly red. He coughed awkwardly and quickly changed the topic. "However, you can rest assured that as a man, it's too shameful to make a woman worry." Face. Hearing this, Yuluo looked at Wuchun with jealousy and said unhappily, "Only a fool would care about face. I just want to live on peacefully. I don't have much hope." Wuchun didn't say anything and just looked at Yuluo quietly. He felt a rare satisfaction in his heart, and his face showed a rare sincere kindness. What else could he ask for in life? Haguro, 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 Haguro's Haguro, 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 Haguro. Dustless, wearing a spiral mask, looked at Obito, who was panting on the ground, and smiled under the mask. This kid is so hard to train himself all day long. In the empty depths of the underground, only Obito and Zetsu were left. As for Madara, that old man, he died not long ago. "Are you here to stop me from attacking Konoha?" Looking at Dustless's spiral mask, Obito didn't need to think to know why Dustless was looking for him. In front of Dustless, he didn't need to wear a mask to hide his identity. Besides Madara, Dustless was the only one who knew his identity. If there's one thing that Obito is most interested in right now, besides the destruction of Konoha, it's the identity of Dustless. He has asked Madara about this matter before, but Madara gave him a perfunctory answer. Until Madara's death, Obito didn't ask who Dustless was. "That's not it, and instead of stopping you, I will help you." Dustless smiled. His tone was very flat, which showed that Dustless was serious. Help me? Hearing this, Obito frowned and looked at Dustless in confusion. Although he and Dustless spent a very short time together, it didn't mean that he didn't know what kind of person Dustless was. This is a smiling tiger. Whether it's strength or shrewdness, he's on the same level as Madara. He's definitely a master who eats people without spitting out the bones. Do you think I can trust you? Looking at Dustless faintly, Obito asked. Although before his death, Madara told him that Dustless was reliable and a trustworthy ally, he was no longer the naive boy he was before. It was necessary to explore Dustless's purpose. Dustless-sama. White Zetsu didn't have as complicated thoughts as Obito. He knew that Dustless was a trustworthy existence, at least for now. Humph. Seeing White Zetsu and Dustless's familiarity, Obito just snorted with dissatisfaction, and immediately said coldly, I don't care what your purpose is in going to Konoha, but Namake's Minato will die. Speaking of this, Obito's eyes were filled with murderous intent, and he looked very fierce. Idiot. Dustless saw this and smiled contemptuously, thinking, even if you're a villain on the same level as Madara, after all, you're just a pawn of mine. Shaking his head, the gap between Obito and Madara wasn't small at all. When Minato's wife gives birth, I will take the opportunity to attack and extract the Kyuubi from Uzumaki Kushina's body. After pondering for a while, Obito spoke of his plan. As for the life and death of his former master's wife, it doesn't matter to him anymore. Anyway, Obito's goal is to avenge Rin's death. That's not a problem. I will help you contain the rest of Konoha. Seeing Obito so insistent that Minato killed Rin Noara, Dustless was relieved. Fortunately, he used the Tensigen to perfectly control Rin's mind and body. Otherwise, with Obito's current state of mind, he might have noticed something fishy. Chapter 132. Dustless didn't have any doubts about Obito's plan, because his plan was successful. He successfully released the Kyuubi, and although it was a pity that he didn't kill Minato himself, at least he succeeded in killing the couple because of the Kyuubi. To some extent, Obito's plan was indeed perfect. Although the Kyuubi's plan to destroy Konoha's ninja village was successfully stopped by the fourth Hokage, overall, it was good and feasible. If Dustless-sama joins us, this plan to attack Konoha's ninja village will definitely succeed. White Zetsu has seen Dustless's strength with his own eyes. He can confront Madara head-on, and he's not at a disadvantage. His combat power is absolutely incredible. Compared to Uchiha Obito, he was much stronger. Indeed. Black Zetsu also nodded, but there was a vague fear in his eyes. Even Dustless didn't catch this subtle change. In that case, we will invade Konoha immediately. Obito put on his spiral mask, revealing only his Mangekyo Sharingan, and said murderously. As for Dustless's purpose, Obito was too lazy to ask. Anyway, as Zetsu said, with Dustless's help, the chance of destroying Konoha will only be greater. Unknowingly, the Third Shinobi World War was completely over. Although Konoha also suffered heavy losses, it was much stronger than the other four villages. Especially after the surrender of the rock in the sand, Konoha gained a lot of benefits, and its combat power soared, leaving the cloud behind. The bitter cloud hidden village could only grit their teeth and swallow their anger, secretly investigating Wuchin's whereabouts. The victory of the Third Shinobi World War established Konoha's position as the overlord. Compared to the other four villages, the whole village was filled with joy and laughter. Sure enough, once people indulge in peace, no matter who they are, they will fall and stop evolving. Minato-sensei, you are the same. Obito, wearing a one-eyed mask, stood on the forest, looking indifferently at the giant village in the distance, and the tone of his voice suddenly changed. Destroy Konoha, from now on. Hearing this, Dustless, who was standing next to Obito, glanced at him, then turned his head and looked at the village in front of him indifferently. However, the most shocking thing was that Dustless just stood in the void calmly and quietly, as if he was standing on some invisible support point. He just floated in the sky calmly like that. This guy's ability is really strange, and the people around him are also very strange. Staring at Wuchin floating in the air, Obito's face changed slightly. The surprise in his 3-tomo Sharingan was clear, especially the woman floating in the air beside Wuchen, which made him even more surprised. It was really strange that these two people could float in the sky without the help of external forces. The woman beside Dustless was naturally Otsutsuki Haruo. The only difference was that Otsutsuki Haruo's eyebrows sometimes appeared lazy, with a sense of maturity that had never been there before, and between her eyebrows, there was an indescribable attraction, just like a peerless demon. Obviously, she had been cured by Dustless a few days ago. However, the only regrettable thing was that the beautiful woman's face was cold at the moment, and she had an expression that rejected people thousands of miles away, especially that extremely indifferent face, which made Obito stop the idea of going forward to talk to her. In the past, he took the initiative to talk to Otsutsuki Haruo, wanting to take advantage of her close relationship with Dustless to ask about Dustless's identity, but he was directly ignored. What's going on? Why do I keep feeling that the woman beside Dustless is familiar? Black Zetsu looked at Otsutsuki Haruo vaguely. He didn't know why, but he always had a feeling of déjà vu, but he couldn't figure out who it was. This strange feeling began from the first time he saw Otsutsuki Haruo. Now start implementing your plan, Obito. I will attack Konoha openly, lure the tiger away from the mountain, and attract the attention of Minato, Sandaime, and other ninjas, while you take the opportunity to capture the Kyuubi. Turning his head and glancing at Obito, Dustless then retracted his gaze and looked straight at the huge village in front of him, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He no longer had any feelings for Konoha. Well, that's the best. Obito nodded. If Dustless could take the initiative to attract the attention of Konoha's ninjas, it would be the best, and the plan to steal the Kyuubi would be even more perfect. Dustless also slightly nodded, and immediately turned into a rainbow light and swept straight ahead, followed by Otsutsuki Haruo. Haruo, you go and follow that Uchiha Obito kid. After a long while, Wuchen's body suddenly stopped, and he ordered Otsutsuki Uluo behind him with a gloomy face. His cold eyes reflected a strong killing intent. Do you suspect that Uchiha Obito might betray us? Looking at Dustless in surprise, Otsutsuki Haruo tucked the hair on both sides of his bun behind his ears. That's not it. His loyalty to us is unquestionable. Dustless immediately shook his head. Uchiha Obito had been completely corrupted, and naturally, he would side with them. The only thing Dustless was worried about was that the kid couldn't fight against Minato. Minato is not that kind of simple person. In order to prevent any big mistakes, once you have no choice, you must kill him. His eyes filled with determination, Dustless said coldly. Minato was the only person who knew that he was controlling Rin. Only by completely erasing this unstable factor, Dustless's heart would sink into the sea, and he would be able to rest easy. Otsutsuki Haruo hesitated, nodded, and rushed in the direction of Uchiha Obito. Chapter 133. The reason why Dustless let Namikaze Minato live until now was really for the sake of Obito. Just like Uzumaki Nagato, it was just for the sake of killing the enemy with his own hands in the future, so that he could eliminate the demons in his heart and make Obito more loyal to him. However, if an unexpected situation happened, he could only send Namikaze Minato to heaven. But before that, Konoha's ninjas should be attracted here. Wuchen lowered his gaze and looked at the brightly lit village on the ground. An indifferent smile hung on the corner of his mouth, giving people a strange feeling. Suddenly, his body stopped and floated casually in the sky. Things have changed. After so many years, I didn't expect to meet again in this scene. Goodbye, Konoha. The cool night breeze blew Wuchen's messy hair. The emotion in his eyes quickly converged and turned into a cold, killing intent. He raised his head slightly and looked at many giant mountains in the distance. Wuchen's palm suddenly exerted force. Kakaka. Boom. Boom. The humongous mountains suddenly began to shake, and a buzzing sound was heard. The strong wave made the entire village of Konoha move slowly. Looking down, one could clearly see that the village of Konoha on the ground was also shaking. The coverage was unprecedentedly vast and infinite. What's going on with this strong vibration? It doesn't seem like an ordinary earthquake. Feeling the unusual ground shaking, Minato's face changed dramatically. At first he thought it was just an ordinary small earthquake, but he didn't expect that as time passed, the shaking not only did not weaken, but also continued to increase. His heart was filled with uneasiness and irritation. What's going on, damn it, this happened at this time. Rubbing his golden hair angrily, Minato was extremely distressed and gloomy. Now Uzumaki Kushina was giving birth, and such a strange geological change happened at this time, obviously indicating that things were unusual. At the same time, all the ninjas in Konoha felt the abnormality of the vibration, and walked out of the house, looking at each other. They could see the shock in each other's eyes. It seems that something big has happened. I'm sorry, Kushina. Reluctantly looking at the barrier behind him, Namake's Minato's face was full of regret. He sighed slightly and immediately turned to leave. Namake's Minato was a person with a strong sense of responsibility. In his heart, the safety of the village was always the most important, and Uzumaki Kushina, who was about to give birth, was second. Minato himself was a speed-type ninja, and the golden rainbow cut through the night sky, rushing straight toward the center of Konoha at full speed, and soon disappeared. What a foolish man. Don't worry, your wife will meet you in hell soon. The void where Namake's Minato was standing before distorted, showing a vortex shape, circle by circle, and a person wearing black clothes and a monocular mask appeared. His voice sounded extremely young, and there was a sense of transcendence in his tone as if he had seen through the essence of the world. This was Uchiha Obito. It's really a secret place. Thanks to you, Zetsu. Looking around the secret and strange place, Obito nodded slightly, and immediately looked at the Nepenthes at his feet, and praised softly. Zetsu's intelligence-gathering ability is really not to be underestimated, especially the number of white Zetsu's clones, thousands of them, almost all of the corners of the ninja world. There is little information that can't be gathered. This is a good barrier, but it doesn't have any effect on me. The corner of his mouth rose, and under the mask, Obito showed a contemptuous smile, and immediately walked into the square barrier without fear. Compared to Obito, who was very careful, the other side was huge, and there was a sea of people. It seems that it's almost time to start. Dustless's indifferent eyes swept through the crowd below. Although he saw many people he knew in the past, for Dustless, who has completely sealed his heart, these people have become insignificant. After all, their positions and ideas are all different, and these friends who used to be separated are now all enemies. Ka. Pung pung pung. In the distance, the huge mountain collapsed due to the tremors, and countless meteorites continued to fall from the sky, and mercilessly hit the ground. Staring at the collapsing mountain, Dustless suddenly raised his right arm, and gently touched the broken stones with his palm, and then his right arm seemed to be full of magic power. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The lifeless boulders rose from the ground, ignoring the existence of the law of gravity, and soared into the sky, floating in the air as if they were floating. Looking around, the meteorites in the sky were big and small, some were as big as a thumb, and some were as big as a beast, and they flew towards Dustless. This trick is really convenient. Looking up at the endless mountain rubble above his head, Dustless suddenly remembered the scene when he invaded the moon. At that time, Otsutsuki Hagoromo treated him with this jutsu, and buried him alive. What goes around comes around. Today it's your turn to enjoy. Laughing happily, Wuchin's raised hand dropped down, and the gravel mountain in the sky completely ignored gravity fell instantly. The number was dense and the scope was vast. It easily covered the whole village of Konoha. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Fortunately, it's a dark night, otherwise if it's daytime, you can clearly see the scene of thousands of meteorites pouring down like a torrential rain. It's extraordinarily spectacular and dazzling. Of course, there are some ninjas with outstanding abilities in Konoha below, especially the ninjas of the Hyuga clan and the Uchiha clan, who can see particularly clearly. Countless giant meteorites are mercilessly smashing towards them. Chapter 134. The ninjas of the Hyuga and Uchiha clans were stunned, and they looked at the meteorites in disbelief. After a while, their faces were filled with despair. Quick! Many ninjas of the Uchiha and Hyuga clans wanted to shout at the people around them to escape, but they swallowed the words that were about to come out of their mouths. With such a large range of dense attacks covering the entire Konoha, there was no way to escape. No matter where they escaped, there was only a dead end. Whoosh! Boom! Golden flashes of light streaked across the sky, effortlessly shattering the falling meteors. The words fourth generation leader could be clearly seen on the Haori behind him. After Minato landed on the ground, he directly shouted at the crowd, "Hurry up and hide, it's best to hide in the basement." Although this was a bad idea, it was also the best one Minato could think of so far. These meteorites almost covered the entire sky of Konoha, and it was impossible to defend all of them. They could only passively take the hits. Minato, who attacked the village. Damn, what an amazing scale. An angry old voice sounded, and it was the angry Sandaime. He thought that after handing over the village to Minato, the most capable young Hokage in history, he could enjoy his old age and live the rest of his life leisurely. However, looking at the current situation, whether he could survive this catastrophe was a problem. Sandaime-sama, I'm sorry to disappoint you. I don't know who the enemy is and what technique they used to attack the village. Minato's mouth raised a self-deprecating smile, looking at the Sandaime's old face with guilt. As the Hokage of the village, it's really hard to explain that he didn't even know who the enemy was after being attacked by a sneak attack. Don't worry about these trivial things. It doesn't matter who the enemy is, the key is how to take them down. Speaking of this, the Sandaime's tone was completely cold, and his killing intent was revealed. He looked up at the sky. For ninjas of their level, there was almost no difference between day and night. Especially Dustless, who was wearing a mask, was still standing motionless in the sky. Obviously, he was deliberately exposing himself. Minato also stared at Dustless, and his brain cells began to speed up, thinking about Dustless's intention of attacking Konoha with such great fanfare. Boom, boom, boom. A large number of giant meteorites all hit Konoha's village, and countless houses and buildings collapsed. The ground was almost like the surface of the moon, and there were holes everywhere, big and small. This scene played out in the entire village. Bastard, bastard, bastard. We must make this bastard pay the price for attacking Konoha. His thunderous roar was like an erupting volcano, and the sound waves that spread out were like blazing heat waves. Everyone could not help but look sideways at the hysterical old man who seemed to have gone mad. It turned out to be Danzo. Sandaime looked at Shimura Danzo and nodded calmly. Although this old enemy of his was always against him, his loyalty to Konoha was not to be doubted. Anyone could be sentenced to Konoha's ninja village, but not Shimura Danzo. Minato, you're the fourth Hokage. What are you standing there for? Hurry up and call the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki to kill that damn bastard. Shimura Danzo glared at Minato and said in a cold tone, if it weren't for Minato, the position of the fourth Hokage would have been his. For Shimura Danzo, who was crazy about being the fourth Hokage, it was hard for him to be nice to Minato. Danzo, it's impossible. Don't think about it, Kushina is on her due date. With a frown, the Sandaime coldly reprimanded Danzo, cursing him in his heart. This old guy was decades old, and he was still trying to harm his own people. How could he bear it? So what? The man in front of us is stronger than we imagined. If we don't call the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki to deal with him, who else can be his opponent? Danzo looked at the Sandaime with a sneer, and said in a righteous tone, not backing down. This was not only an opportunity to get rid of the masked man in the sky, but also to get rid of Uzumaki Kushina. Uzumaki Kushina was now pregnant, and if she was forced to fight against the masked man in the sky, both of them might die of exhaustion. In the end, Shimura Danzo would push the Root clan to be his Jinchuriki, and he would have another weapon in his hand to defeat the enemy. I'm the fourth Hokage, and I will protect the village even if I have to die. The killing intent in his eyes disappeared in a flash, and Minato coldly looked at Shimura Danzo. There was no room for negotiation, and his tone was full of courage. How could he not know what Danzo was thinking? He wanted his wife to deal with the masked man? Don't even think about it. What a joke. Can your death exchange for the safety of the entire village? Too naive, Minato. Danzo mocked Minato. Although he was influenced by Minato's courage, he couldn't shake his plan. Enough, Danzo, the enemy is right in front of you. Even if you want to play tricks, you should stop. In the end, he couldn't suppress the anger in his heart. The Sandaime stared at Shimura Danzo angrily. His blood-red eyes were filled with cold light. He was very annoyed. Now that the enemy was at their doorstep, whether Konoha could survive or not was a problem. Chakra was surging in his body, and the Sandaime was obviously showing his determination and position. I hope you don't regret this, Sarutobi. Feeling the Sandaime's killing intent, Shimura Danzo's face was livid. He fiercely looked at the silent Minato, and angrily looked at the masked man in the sky, dustless. Chapter 135. The third Hokage's strong intervention cooled down the internal strife, and they began to turn their attention to the masked man in the sky, dustless. What is this guy's purpose? It wasn't just Minato and Sandaime who were puzzled. Even Shimura Danzo was very puzzled. Everything had to be done with a motive. Why would Dustless be so straightforward? Even an idiot wouldn't believe it. Minato's thoughts were running wild, and he was distressed. However, Dustless in the sky didn't care what these people were thinking. He raised his hand, and the earth shook. Kakaka. Under the astonished gaze of Konoha's shinobi, countless meteorites once again gathered in the sky, densely packed like ants, covering the entire sky. Sarutobi, what else do you have to say? Immediately release the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki. Seeing this, Shimura Danzo looked at the third Hokage with a pale face. He had an impulse to go crazy, and he couldn't wait to put the third Hokage on the ground and beat him violently. With such a terrifying range, there was no way to deal with it other than releasing the Kyuubi. Yes, this guy wants the Kyuubi. Shimura Danzo's words made Minato's mind flash, and he suddenly remembered the Kyuubi, the strongest bijou. For ordinary people, the Kyuubi is the embodiment of disaster, but for people like Dustless, the Kyuubi is a delicious cake. Minato, are you sure? Hearing that the masked man, Dustless, wanted the Kyuubi, the third Hokage's heart fell to the bottom of the valley. His eyes were gloomy as he looked at the thin figure in the sky, and his muddy old eyes showed a trace of understanding. Minato, go support Kushina. This may be a trick to lure the tiger away from the mountain. The third Hokage roared anxiously, and his body was overflowing with murderous intent. He said coldly. From the beginning he wanted the Kyuubi. So what? Dustless, who was floating in the sky, smiled indifferently. He wasn't worried about Obito's success in capturing the Kyuubi, because that kid wasn't a good person. He wouldn't be merciful just because Uzumaki Kushina was his master's wife. Today, Obito was more ruthless than anyone. But I'm the fourth Hokage. Shut up. The safety of the Kyuubi is above everything else, and the foundation of the village. Leave this kid to me. Looking at the hesitant Minato, Sandaime Hokage said with dissatisfaction. The worst and best problem of this kid is that he has too much responsibility, and Namikaze Minato wouldn't be of any use here. I understand, Sandaime-sama. Minato was not an indecisive person. After struggling for a while, he rushed in the direction of Kushina. As the Sandaime said, the Kyuubi was the foundation of Konoha's foothold. Without it, Konoha would be a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. Sandaime Hokage, you can't compete with me. The conversation between Sandaime Hokage and Namikaze Minato was naturally heard by Wuxia, and he shook his head helplessly. He has both the Tensigen and Rinnegan, plus the glinting fruit, which can ignore most physical attacks in the world. If he lost to an old man like Sandaime Hokage, he should have fallen many years ago. Dustless, with his strong vision, clearly saw Minato leaving, and he was too lazy to stop him. Anyway, Otsutsuki Hagoromo was watching Obito, and if something unexpected happened, he would follow Dustless's orders and directly kill Minato. Sarutobi, are you crazy? Watching Minato leave, Shimura Danzo's mouth twitched fiercely, and his old face turned black as he glared at the third. Minato was the most powerful of the three. Now that he left, it meant that the only people left to face the masked man would be Shimura Danzo and the third. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. A dense meteorite rain slammed down from the sky, thousands of them, overwhelming everyone. Once again, all of them roared down, mercilessly falling towards Konoha's ninjas on the ground. Boom, boom, boom. Although many of the meteorites were destroyed by Konoha's ninjas, the scale of the meteorites was too large, and there was not enough manpower to completely clean them up. Many of Konoha's ninjas were smashed into pieces. The endless smell of blood filled the void, and because it was too strong, it didn't dissipate for a long time. Looking at Konoha, although many ordinary people escaped from the battlefield, there were still many who were mercilessly smashed into pieces. Bastard! Seeing this tragic scene, Shimura Danzo shouted loudly, and his eyes were sunken, and his eyeballs were much larger than usual, as if they were about to burst. It was extremely terrifying. I can only use that jutsu. I hope the two-sama will forgive me. Looking at Konoha's hell on earth, the 3RD's face was also extremely ugly. Soon, his sad old face was filled with determination and murderous intent. He stared at Dustless, and the murderous intent in his eyes raged like a tide. Such a deep blood feud must be paid back. The Sandaime Hokage gives off a very gentle feeling, like a kind and benevolent grandpa next door. But before that, there must be a premise, and that is the other party must not be an enemy. In the face of an enemy, the third will completely take off his mask of kindness and show his violent side as the Hokage. Is it possible that, hearing this, Shimura Danzo's heart sank? He naturally knew about the so-called jutsu, and it can also be said that the first and second Hokage left behind another precious treasure for Konoha besides the Kyuubi. In this case, we should be able to defeat the masked man. Seeing the third completely take off his mask of kindness at this moment, Shimura Danzo breathed a sigh of relief. His heart that was crushed by the masked man Dustless finally regained some confidence. Crack, crack, crack. The ground suddenly cracked open, and two aged coffins were flipped out of the loose soil. Chapter 136. The smell of decay wafted out from the pitch-black coffins. Unfortunately, the two coffins were still as good as new. It was obvious that they had been preserved by some kind of special secret technique. It turned out to be the Edo Tensei. It should be the first Hokage Senju Hashirama. As for the second coffin, it should be his younger brother, the second Hokage Senju Tobirama. Wu Chen's eyes were calm from beginning to end. He lived in Konoha for a few years and knew that Konoha left these corpses for a rainy day in the future. The inventor of the Edo Tensei, Tobirama, hoped to preserve the strength of Konoha with this technique, so that one day in the future, when Konoha encountered a calamity, they could be awakened again to help Konoha escape. A mere dead person actually came out to make a fool of himself. Well, let me see how peerless the god of ninja, Hashirama Senju is. Dustless's mouth under the mask curled into a smile, and then his body began to slowly fall from the sky and landed on the ground a few hundred feet away from the Hokage. What a strong vitality! Dustless's right eye suddenly turned blue, and the scene in the coffin was very clear. He could clearly see the majestic vitality contained in Hashirama's body, even if he was dead. As for Tobirama, he was no different from an ordinary person. Well, it saved me a lot of effort. Dustless's eyes became cold. He originally wanted to go to Hashirama after this sneak attack on Konoha, so that he could take away his Senjutsu chakra, but now it seems that it was unnecessary. He can take away everything from Hashirama. On the other side, Uchiha Obito easily invaded the barrier, and killed all the ninjas who were guarding the barrier around him. Hate your miserable life, Uzumaki Kushina. Who told you to marry that stupid man, Minato? All of this is your own fault. Staring at Uzumaki Kushina, Uchiha Obito walked over with light steps. He looked coldly at Uzumaki Kushina's sweat-stained face, and his face was cold. Next to Uzumaki Kushina was a newborn baby in a cradle. You, who are you? Struggling to open her eyes, Kushina looked at Obito, who was wearing a mask, and only one of his eyes was exposed. She asked weakly at the same time, her sleepy eyes swept around. You actually killed them. Kushina glared at the masked Obito, and used all her strength to prop herself up. However, because she had just given birth, she was exhausted and fell down again. It doesn't matter who I am. In any case, the 9 tails in your body will break out of its cage soon. In the distance, Otsutsuki Hagoromo quietly looked at the scene in front of him, and couldn't help but shake his head, sighing that Dustless made Obito suffer too much. Letting Rin die in the hands of Minato was too much of a blow to Obito, causing him to be so obsessed with the Minato couple. If it weren't for Dustless's interference, Obito wouldn't have been so crazy. Ao ao ao. A deafening roar suddenly resounded through the sky, and an evil feeling pressed on everyone's heart. Even from a few kilometers away, they could feel the doomsday-like panic. He raised his head and saw a huge orange fox with 9 tails. It was swaying its 9 thick tails. If one were to be swept by the scarlet eyes of the killer, one would feel as if one's soul would crumble. There was no need for anything else. Just his incomparably calm gaze was enough to scare people to death. A mere beast dares to be so unscrupulous. Coming out of the delivery room where Uzumaki Kushina gave birth, Obito looked indifferently at the Kyuubi raging in the sky, and the 3 Tomo Sharingan on his mask showed contempt. I'll put a collar on you now. Staring at the evil eyes of the Kyuubi, Obito disdainfully curled his lips, and then his eyes suddenly widened. Ao ao. The Kyuubi, who was planning to celebrate breaking out of the prison, was suddenly trapped in Konoha for decades. His blood-red eyes became even redder and more evil. And just as he was about to erupt his power and turn Konoha upside down, his scarlet eyes turned into 3 Tomo Sharingan, and his whole body became stiff. His angry expression also became sluggish, obviously under Obito's control. Good eye power. But it's really different from him. Staring at the Kyuubi who had calmed down, Otsutsuki Hagoromo nodded indifferently. There was a difference between this eye power and Dustless's. Let's go, Zetsu. Glancing at Zetsu, who was still outside the barrier, Obito said indifferently, and his body suddenly began to fade, and then quickly disappeared. As for Uzumaki Kushina's life and death, he didn't need to care. Even if the vitality of the Uzumaki clan is strong, and the amount of chakra is also strong, after the tailed beast is extracted, only death awaits. This is an iron law that hasn't changed for thousands of years. Seeing Obito leave, Zetsu no longer stayed, and his body began to slowly sink into the ground, and then disappeared. However, Black Zetsu glanced at the place where Otsutsuki was hiding. That guy is really not simple, worthy of Kagaya's will. Noticing that Zetsu and Obito had left, Otsutsuki Hagoromo gracefully walked out of the jungle. She originally thought that Dustless was deliberately fooling her, but he just wanted to borrow her strength. Now it seems that what Dustless said was true. Black Zetsu was definitely not as simple as he looked. The legendary goddess of Uno, no wonder Dustless trained himself so hard. Otsutsuki's red lips slightly pouted, and only then did Otsutsuki understand why Dustless desperately increased his strength. As the former head of the Otsutsuki clan, she knew far more about Kagaya than Dustless. To put it bluntly, Otsutsuki Kagaya was the origin of all things in the world, the original owner of chakra, the god of creation, the ultimate existence of immortality. Chapter 137. Wuchen stared at the 2 black coffins with endless decay. Tensigen could clearly see the scene inside the black coffins. He could clearly see that Hashirama's body was extremely well preserved, almost no different from when he was alive. He was like a living dead who had lost his breath, and was about to fall asleep. As expected of the legendary god of ninja, Hashirama, you really can't be underestimated. After a while, Dustless calmly retracted his gaze. Although he verbally called Hashirama the god of ninja, anyone could hear how contemptuous and even disdainful his tone was. For the former Dustless, Hashirama was an existence that he could only look up to, but for the current him, Hashirama was just a drop in the ocean, an insignificant passerby in the long river of life. Good boy, you're really bold. Shimura Danzo's mouth twitched fiercely as he looked at Dustless with a gloomy expression. He thought that Dustless didn't know that the person in the coffin was Hashirama, but now it seems that he thought too much. Huh. With the roar of the 3rd Hokage, chakra erupted from his body, and when he looked up, he could clearly see that the figure in the coffin was moving. 2 figures stood up like ghosts, It's really a long time since I've had fresh air. This bastard, who did this? The angry voice resounded through the sky, as if an ancient creature had awakened. Accompanied by the dark blue chakra's restlessness, the burst of chakra directly shook the ground, and many cracks appeared. The two coffins were impressively turned into ruins, and the person who was angry was the first Hokage, also known as the god of ninja, Hashirama Senju. Big brother, don't use chakra. The second Hokage, who was also Edo Tensei, frowned and scolded. At the same time, he looked at the tragic situation of Konoha from the corner of his eyes, and his brows suddenly became gloomy, and his murderous intent erupted uncontrollably. Konoha village was managed by Hashirama and Tobirama. They even sacrificed their lives for it. Now it was destroyed like hell. How could the two brothers not be angry? There's no need to look, the person who slaughtered Konoha is. Before Dustless could finish his sentence, the silver-white cold light in front of him whistled. The sharp cold light reflected a killing intent that made people unable to open their eyes. It was as if they opened their eyes, they would be blinded by the cold light. As expected of the second Hokage, famous for his speed, Dustless turned his head, revealing half of his face, and praised without hesitation. Nidame's speed was really fast, and the human eye simply couldn't capture his movement. It was as if he used a space ninjutsu to fly over. Penetrate it? Looking back at Dustless's back, Tobirama frowned slightly, and Edo Tensei's face was full of doubt. He was sure that his tachi had passed through Dustless's body. Dustless's body felt as if it had turned illusory in an instant. The Uchiha clan's flame fan? Isn't that Madara's weapon? Where did he get it? Hashirama looked at the flame fan behind Dustless with interest. As an old enemy of Madara, he certainly knew that it was Madara's weapon. This was given to me by Uchiha Madara. Looking at Hashirama, Dustless was quite teasing. Nonsense, Uchiha Madara has been dead for decades. This kid must have stolen it. Shimura Danzo, who had been unhappy with Dustless for a long time, immediately frowned. When Madara and Hashirama fought, he and the third Hokage became their apprentices, so naturally, they knew what happened. Not long after the battle, Hashirama also died. In terms of time, it was impossible for Madara to give the flame fan to Dustless. Brother, this kid's ability seems a bit strange. He seems to be able to turn illusory. His eyes narrowed slightly, staring at Dustless with a spiral mask. Tobirama was surprised. It doesn't matter where Dustless's flame fan came from. As long as they capture him, the truth will naturally come to light. Tobirama carefully looked at Dustless with a mask, and his eyes became cold. Dustless destroyed Konoha, and he must pay with his blood. I know. Hashirama naturally saw the difference in Dustless, but he didn't care too much. There were many kinds of ninjutsu in the world, and there were all kinds of them. The only thing that made Hashirama feel strange was that Dustless seemed to have a special power that resonated with him. Let's test him first. Hashirama, who couldn't find the reason, no longer entangled, he printed with both hands, and the majestic chakra broke out of his body, and the ground with Hashirama as the center began to tremble slightly, and the tremors continued to spread wildly. Would release, world of trees. Boom. The ground suddenly cracked, and countless thick trees emerged from the depths of the ground. The number was dense and endless, and the surrounding environment instantly turned into an endless green jungle. Amazing range. Looking at the green jungle that seemed to swallow the whole world, Dustless nodded slightly, and his eyes once again fell on Hashirama, and he restored his eternal calmness. Whoosh! Countless green vines emerged from under his feet, and they rose sharply along Dustless's legs, and soon Dustless was firmly tied. Say, who are you, and what is your purpose? Hashirama's voice stopped abruptly, and he saw Dustless's body suddenly swept a swallowing force, and the vines that were still full of vitality instantly fell to the ground like dead branches. This guy. Seeing this, Hashirama's face sank, and he looked at Dustless with a dignified expression. He knew that Dustless swallowed all the chakra in the wood release. Chapter 138. Tobirama stared at the dead trees on the ground, and his pupils narrowed slightly. After feeling it carefully, his face changed slightly. Naturally, he knew how powerful it was. Only Mokutan absorbed other people's chakra. This was the first time that Mokutan was absorbed by the opponent's jutsu. This guy is weird, Hashirama said cautiously. Absorbing chakra was not something that anyone could do, especially the masked man in front of him. It was obvious that he used his own strength to easily absorb Mokutan in an instant. Mokutan, flower tree world descends. Buzz. As Hashirama's voice fell, the thick trees in the forest began to surge rapidly, and many thick tree branches burst out of huge pink buds. Suddenly, the pink buds bloomed, and yellow smoke floated out. As long as you breathe it in, you can feel a sense of powerlessness spread all over your body in an instant. This kind of jutsu is useless to me, Hashirama. His body seemed to ignore the gravity. Wuchen flew to the sky lightly. Endless repulsive force floated out from his body. The tyrannical airwave roared out as if it was crushing dry weeds. It was unstoppable. Super Shinra Tensei. As Dustless's voice fell, the endless green forest on the ground burst open, setting off yellow smoke all over the sky. The visibility was less than 10 feet, and all the pollen that seeped out of Mokutan was blown to the sky. Don't! Hashirama didn't even let out a roar, and his whole body was swallowed by the burst of air, and his body was directly crushed into nothingness. Like evaporating water, he disappeared in an instant. This is the biggest advantage of Edo Tensei, immortal body, infinite chakra. Dustless above the sky stared at Hashirama, who recovered his body and said indifferently. There was no worry in his tone, but he was full of confidence. The so-called invincible body is actually full of mistakes. It's not that there is no way to restrain it. For Dustless, who has Rinnegan and Tensegan at the same time, it's really simple. It really is the legendary Rinnegan. Only Rinnegan can absorb ninjutsu and float in the air without any external force. Under the astonished gaze of Hashirama and Tobirama, Wuchen's left eye turned purple, and the mysterious black lines surged open Rinnegan. What was intriguing was that there were 6 clear black tomo hanging on it. Looks like we're in trouble. This kid should be able to use that technique. Tobirama stood beside Hashirama with Itachi in his hand. His face was full of caution. The advantage of Edo Tensei was no longer there. That's right, it's the Rinnegan without a doubt. He should be able to use Yin-Yang escape. Be careful of Tobirama. If you get hit by that technique, even the Edo Tensei won't be able to recover. Hashirama said cautiously. The advantage of Edo Tensei was no longer there, and the consequences of being contaminated by Yin-Yang release was self-evident. Since it is proven that he has the Rinnegan, it seems that ordinary techniques won't work on him. Then, Hashirama printed with both hands, and the vast and majestic chakra floated out of Hashirama's body. This unprecedented chakra was much more terrifying than the Kyubi. Sage method. Looking up, Hashirama closed his eyes slightly, and there were many red marks on both sides of his eyes. His whole body was filled with a huge natural chakra. Bright God Gate. Red logs fell from the sky, and the shadows covered the sky. Looking up, the number was quite large, and the range was not small. It seemed that they wanted to completely crush Dustless. This should be able to subdue him. Looking at Dustless floating in the sky, Tobirama said with uncertainty. To be honest, he didn't believe it himself. The Rinnegan was above the other 2 dojutsu. If it was so easy to kill it, the reputation of the Rinnegan wouldn't be so bad. How could the legendary Rinnegan, which could create and destroy the world, be so weak? It's worthy of being a technique that can even bind the Jubi. Looking up at the red logs in the sky, Dustless smiled faintly, and then the Rinnegan in his left eye suddenly floated out ripples, and a strong repulsive force was ejected again. Bang bang bang. The cylindrical rosewood that wanted to kill Dustless was suddenly bounced back by this strong repulsive force. Not to mention killing Dustless, it was extremely difficult to even touch him. Attack and defense in one. Tobirama frowned slightly when he saw this. This technique gave him a feeling that it was quite troublesome. Whether it was attack or defense, it was perfect, and there was no loophole at all. It's my turn. Dustless in the sky suddenly disappeared, and only the golden straight light poured down, and went straight toward Hashirama and Tobirama. The thick beam of light emitted a terrifying sharpness that could cut through all things. Anyone who came into contact with it would die. Mokutan Jutsu. The sky suddenly turned dark, and the wooden shield of the fanged ghost face surrounded Hashirama and Tobirama to defend against the terrifying impact of Dustless. According to Dustless's appearance, the probability of him not using Yin-Yang release was 0. Edo Tensei would definitely be finished after being hit by Yin-Yang release. There was no possibility of recovery, so he had to make a defensive countermeasure. It seems that this guy should be coming for the Kyuubi. Tobirama, who was good at using his brain, analyzed and immediately said the answer to Dustless's attack on Konoha. There was nothing in Konoha that could attract Dustless's attention except for the Kyuubi. Indeed. Hashirama also nodded in agreement. Although he didn't know what Dustless wanted to do with the Kyuubi, there was no doubt that he was coming for the Kyuubi. Poochie, the crackling sound of wood cracking resounded, and the golden light illuminated the dark world. Suddenly looking up, it was Dustless who had directly smashed Senju Hashirama's wood-release defense. This guy is really evildoer. The corner of his mouth twitched fiercely, and Tobirama was speechless. This technique once defended against Uchiha Madara. Chapter 139. While Dustless and Hashirama were fighting, Obito wasn't idle either. After taming the Kyuubi, he originally planned to destroy Konoha, but he found out that Konoha was already covered by a meteorite rain. Although Konoha was completely destroyed by Dustless, there were still many fish that escaped the net, such as these two big fish in front of him. The Sandaime Hokage and Shimura Danzo of Root. That's strange. Obito faintly looked at the two old men in front of him, and his eyes under the mask were cautious. If he underestimated these two people because they were over 100 years old, the end will definitely be tragic. After all, Sarutobi and Shimura Danzo were once the disciples of Hashirama and Tobirama. Are you an accomplice of that masked man? And it seems that you have already succeeded. Looking at Obito's one-eyed mask, the Sandaime said in a deep voice. The masked man he was talking about was naturally Dustless, and at the same time, he was afraid that Uzumaki Kushina's bijou might have already been taken away. Especially the evil chakra that appeared just now. It was definitely a bijou's. You turned out to be from the Uchiha clan. Your clan really isn't a good thing. Shimura Danzo fiercely stared at Obito's one-eyed mask, and he could clearly see the three-tomo Sharingan, which confirmed Obito's identity as an Uchiha. That group of traitors should have been destroyed long ago. Thinking of Konoha's heavy losses, Shimura Danzo was furious. Originally, after the Shinobi War, Konoha should have been the strongest shinobi village, far more powerful than the other 4 shinobi villages, but now after these two masked men's torment, I'm afraid they'll fall to the bottom. They are indeed a dangerous clan. The Sandaime also agreed with Shimura Danzo's point of view, and he felt estranged from the Uchiha clan. Only the Uchiha can control the Kyuubi. Although Konoha has been tossed around by that guy, I'll let you enjoy the power of the Kyuubi. Under his mask, Obito had a cold smile on his face. He didn't have a good impression of Konoha's ninjas, and he couldn't wait for them to die. These two old men were the former Hokage, and the other was the leader of Root. There was no doubt that they were powerful figures. If they die, Konoha might really fall. Summoning technique, 9 tails. Ow ow ow. Bang bang bang. Every time the 9-tailed beast appeared, it was accompanied by a strong geological change. Its huge body crushed the surface of the earth, and its deafening roar mixed with the chakra of calamity spread out. It was like a thunderclap that resounded through the sky, causing the entire night sky to tremble. Dustless, who was fighting Hashirama and Tobirama, was also stunned. Idiot. Looking at the Kyuubi's ferocious appearance in the distance, Dustless's face was livid. He originally thought that after taking the Kyuubi, he would run away, because Konoha was completely destroyed by him. Next, he should take the Kyuubi and run away. There was no need to fight with Konoha to the death. Let's catch the Kyuubi first. Thinking of this, Dustless immediately made a decision in his heart. His eyes were filled with a cold light, and his killing intent burst out like a tide. He turned into a thick beam of light and flew straight toward Obito. In just a blink of an eye, he arrived at Obito's side. The mission of capturing the Kyuubi has been completed. There is no need to waste time on it. Looking at the Kyuubi's 3 Tomo Sharingan, Dustless faintly said to Obito. His tone was full of dissatisfaction. And then looking deeply at Obito, Dustless said, "There is no need to show off. Don't forget the essence of our plan. There is no need to waste time on Konoha's ninjas." Obito was stunned when he heard this, and his 3 Tomo Sharingan became a little clearer. He nodded slightly indeed. There was no need to waste time on Konoha's people. 4 Red Yang formation. Just as Uchiha Obito and Wuchin were about to leave, a fiery red square-shaped barrier suddenly appeared, tightly wrapping around Wuchin, Uchiha Obito, and the Kyuubi. There is a road to heaven, but you don't take it. There is no door to hell, but you throw yourself into it. Staring at the fiery red barrier that suddenly appeared, Dustless's face was ugly. He originally wanted to give face to Konoha's ninja village, but he didn't expect this group of stubborn old people to be so stupid. The power of the 4 Red Yang formation is beyond doubt. It requires 4 Hokages to release a powerful barrier. Hashirama, Tobirama, and the Sandame plus the Yandame, who just arrived, just made 4 people. You want to go to hell with 4 people? I will fulfill your wish. With a cruel sneer on his face, Dustless's pupils suddenly enlarged, and a cold and sharp light shot out of his eyes. His aura continued to rise, and the golden energy fluctuations swept up, and the materialized chakra gushed out. You think such a weak barrier can restrict my actions? You are too naive. Looking at the 4 Hokage outside the enchantment, Wuchin grinned. Well, since I defeated that kid and got everything he had, I haven't used this technique. Today, I'll let you see it. Kinsusanu. Boom. Boom. The golden high-density chakra instantly rose to a height of 100 meters, and the mighty golden giant covered the sky. The brilliant afterglow sprinkled the endless void, and the dark night became as bright as day. The 100-meter-tall giant had 4 arms and 2 heads, and 2 slender katanas on its waist. Even if it hasn't been drawn, one can feel the power of the katana. This is the ultimate Kinsusanu, so he is from the Uchiha clan. Looking cautiously at the golden giant covering the sky, Hashirama's heart sank. From the height of Kinsusanu's power, Dustless's eye power has surpassed Madara's. Chapter 140. The 100-meter-tall golden giant crushed the sky. Its mountain-like body stood between the heavens and the earth, and it was extremely domineering. Its ancient aura swept through the heavens and the earth, and its body had traces of time. Its scarlet eyes pulsed with hellish demonic light, and its heavy armor gave people the feeling that it had been on the battlefield for a long time. That invincible momentum made people deeply moved, and they couldn't help but sigh that such a giant could only be matched by a god. This guy's Kinsusanu is really big, and it hasn't merged with the Kyuubi yet. Otherwise, its size should be bigger. Hashirama muttered to himself, and he couldn't help but compare Madara and Dustless in the Valley of the End. Suddenly, he felt that Madara's Kinsusanu was a mature version. Hashirama's heart felt extremely subtle, and to be specific, it was quite a feeling of clearing the clouds and seeing the blue sky. The golden Kinsusanu in front of him was a veritable ultimate version. As for Madara's Kinsusanu, it was just a fake. A new generation replaces the old, and even if we are resurrected, we are not as good as these young people. Looking at the tall and extraordinary Kinsusanu, Hashirama's face was complicated, and his tone was unprecedentedly melancholy. It was hard to imagine that the usually optimistic Hashirama had such a feeling of loneliness. It was not flattery, although Dustless was wearing a mask to cover his face. From his figure, Dustless was now only in his 20s, and his future potential was almost unlimited. Brother, now is not the time for you to be secretly sad. Tobirama stared at Hashirama, and then said bitterly, looking at Dustless's 100-meter-tall Kinsusanu. His heart was very depressed, and his heart was uncontrollably filled with a sense of insignificance, and the more he deliberately avoided, the more intense it was. This kind of enchantment can't do anything to me. Staring at the red enchantment in front of him, Dustless smiled contemptuously. Kinsusinu also pulled out the tachi in his hand. The surface of the tachi was not very sharp, but it was like an unforged scrap sword, and the blade was extremely thick. However, even so, it gave others a feeling that it was as easy as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. It was like a heavy sword without a sharp edge, and it gave off a feeling of great ingenuity. Suddenly, a straight ray of light appeared in the sky, and the dark sky was particularly conspicuous, and the piercing light seemed to cut the supreme sky. Whoosh! The golden katana came crashing down, easily leaving a long and narrow scar on the fiery red barrier. Due to the great strength, the airwaves from the front end of the katana directly collapsed a few mountains in the distance. What a terrifying strength! Seeing this, Senju Hashirama and the other Hokage's complexion slightly changed, and they were stunned. Obviously, they were also shocked by the power of Dustless's ultimate Susanoo. Kacha! Kinsusanu's huge fist broke the enchantment, and he walked out of the collapsed enchantment. Because of his huge body, the ground trembled as Kinsusanu walked. All of you back off. If you stay here, you'll only be a burden to me. Taking a deep breath, Hashirama said sternly. As the saying goes, there is strength in numbers, but there is also a limit. The other three Hokage not only can't do anything, but they may also need his help. Let's go and get the Kyuubi back first. Hashirama nodded, and then looked at the orange monster, and his eyes were cold. Maybe the three of them together are not Dustless's opponent, but he is still confident in attacking Obito. The third Hokage and Minato looked at each other and rushed in the direction of the Kyuubi. You want to take the Kyuubi back? How can I let you do that? Seeing Tobirama and the other two besieging the Kyuubi, Wu Chen's mouth suddenly raised into a sarcastic smile, and the chakra in his body began to surge violently again. Summoning Jutsu, Geto Mazo. Kacha. The giant broke out of the ground and jumped out of the depths of the ground. Its body, which weighed dozens of tons, fell heavily on the ground, splashing a few feet of dust. Even dustless inside, Kinsusanu trembled fiercely. The 9 eyes were fierce, and its whole body was filled with the smell of ancient decay, as if it had come through time, from the world of thousands of years ago to the present world. Now take back the Kyuubi, and control the Geto Mazo. The other half of Obito's body was composed of Hashirama's chakra, so he also had the ability to control the Geto Mazo, but he was not as skilled as Dustless. No problem. Obito nodded. Although it was a bit early to collect the bijou, now was the best time to capture the Kyuubi, and naturally he couldn't let it go. Get in here. He jumped on top of the Geto Mazo's head, and the Geto Mazo opened its big mouth full of fangs, and several thick purple chains shot out of its throat, hooking the Kyuubi's head and pulling it over. As if feeling the strong binding of the chains, the Kyuubi suddenly felt a sense of fear that he had never felt before. Under Obito's control, the Kyuubi began to instinctively resist the Geto Mazo's chains. The Kyuubi's strong resistance made a long trench on the ground. Although the order of injecting the bijou into the Geto Mazo starts with the Ichibi, there's no problem with pulling the bijou in, but the problem? Obito muttered to himself. Injecting the bijou into the Geto Mazo must start with the Ichibi. Otherwise, the balance would be broken. However, there was no bijou in the Geto Mazo, so it shouldn't affect the balance, and if he couldn't, he could pull the Kyuubi out of the Geto Mazo. Rasengan. A yellow light suddenly appeared in front of Obito's eyes, and it was Minato with a cold face. The chakra in his right hand also blasted towards Obito's mask. Idiot. The masked Uchiha Obito smiled contemptuously as he looked at the incoming energy ball without fear. Chapter 141. Looking at the incoming Rasengan without fear, Obito stood in the same place. His body was motionless like a sculpture, letting the giant Rasengan hit his face. It's useless. After saying that, Obito closed his eyes leisurely, turning a deaf ear to the oncoming Minato. The moment he caught Minato's sneak attack, he immediately activated his Sharingan's Kamui ability, turning his body into nothingness. On the other side, the atmosphere was even more solemn and quiet, and the strongest battle was about to begin. It's amazing, I didn't expect the Uchiha family to have a genius like you. Looking at Dustless standing on the head of Kinsusanu, Hashirama sincerely admired him. Although Dustless's face was hidden behind the mask, he could still see that Dustless was definitely not more than 20 years old. But Hashirama's tone suddenly became low, and he looked at Dustless with uncertainty. He seemed to be thinking of the past, and his thoughts were lost in his memories. After a while, Hashirama recovered, and his killing intent burst out like a tide. A majestic chakra was slowly brewing behind him, and several white-headed Buddhas with giant arms were faintly visible. Even the ultimate body Kinsusanu, Dustless, was stunned. It's a pity that you fell into the devil's path at such a young age, Senjutsu. Thousands of hands. As Hashirama's voice fell, several white-headed Buddhas with giant arms suddenly formed behind him, and the huge range was much larger than Dustless's Kinsusanu, and it was heading toward Dustless. No wonder Uchiha Madara lost to Hashirama. Dustless was also secretly shocked. Looking around, he saw numerous Buddhas with thick arms rushing toward him, and the ground was shaking slightly. The momentum was monstrous. Hashirama stood on the head of the Buddhas and rushed toward Dustless's ultimate body, Kinsusanu. I can see that you and Madara are the same kind of people. In order to pursue power, you will do anything, and you will turn a deaf ear to the pain of others. Hashirama's eyes on the head of the Buddha became colder, and his killing intent became more and more thorough. There were signs of condensing into ice. He saw the figure of Uchiha Madara in the past from Wuchen. His mentality was even crazier than Madara's. Wuchen's eyes were stronger than Madara's. Every man for himself, and the devil takes the hindmost. Hearing this, Wuchen sneered at Hashirama. If it wasn't for this guy's Virgin Mary mentality, listening to Madara's advice, maybe Konoha would have unified the world, and there wouldn't be such a large-scale war. It seems that you are really hopeless. Hashirama's expression became colder, and even the surface of his skin was covered with crystal frost. His momentum quickly rose to the limit, and his eyes suddenly shot out a burst of cold light. Top of the Buddha. Whoosh! The giant arms that were tightly connected to each other suddenly poured out in torrents. The dense and huge fists were innumerable, as numerous as the sand in the Ganges, making it impossible to see exactly how many there were. In general, Dustless was sure of one thing, and that was that these dense fists were extremely powerful. A single one could easily crush a small mountain, and if a large number of them gathered together, even his ultimate body Susanoo would inevitably be torn apart. Uchiha Fire Formation. The crimson halo dyed the sky red, and the surrounding temperature instantly increased by dozens of times. Looking up, they saw the crimson flame barrier in front of Dustless's Kinsusanu, and the burning hot barrier replaced Kinsusanu's destruction. Bang bang bang. The powerful giant fists all mercilessly smashed on the flame barrier, and the fierce force made it constantly tremble, and countless cracks quickly spread around. Obviously, it had reached its limit. Kaka. The flame barrier finally failed to resist the destruction, and it exploded into pieces, and the hot lava fell to any corner of the sky, and the ground was burned black. The Susanoo was directly exposed to the attack of the enemy. Bang! The sound of steel buzzing sounded, and Kinsusanu's long sword was unsheathed, and it slashed out a strong slash, and everything in front of it was wiped out. Boom! Huge golden slashes rose from the ground, destroying the heavens and earth. Long and narrow trenches were formed in the ground, exposing the soil deep underground to the air. The rampaging golden radiance easily annihilated many of the giant arms. However, the number of giant fists was too many, and although Dustless's slash destroyed a batch, there were still countless giant fists coming. And Kinsusanu's movement was not convenient, and it directly became the target of the group attack. Bang bang bang. The crisp sound of bones being broken continued, and Dustless knew that Kinsusanu's defense was being peeled off by countless giant fists, and it was constantly being weakened. The Rinnegan in his left eye suddenly surged with cold light, and the black lines also rippled, and the 6 black tomo also swayed slightly. An irresistible repulsion broke out of his body, and it swept out like a wave, spreading without limit, ensuring that no existence around him would be spared. Super Shinra Tensei. The countless giant fists that were attacking the ultimate body Susanoo were suddenly crushed, and they simply disappeared completely, like water vapor in the wind. It seems that it's just SOSO. Boom. Seeing that the huge fist flying towards him was completely destroyed, Dustless breathed a sigh of relief as if relieved of a heavy burden. But at this time, an incomparably thick arm suddenly grabbed him, and the tyrannical strength reached the terrifying degree of several tens of thousands of June, and directly punched Susanoo in the face. It was Hashirama, who was controlling the body of the giant Buddha, and when he got closer, he realized that this Hashirama was much bigger than Dustless's ultimate body Susanoo. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.